Chapter 802. Lu Shi's influence was in Chongzhou. It was not convenient for him and Jiang Pingji to go there. Not long after they entered the north, Lu Shi parted ways with Jiang Pingji and brought his troops to Chongzhou. My lord, you don't have to worry about Old Master. In the north, apart from the Tsing-Yi army, there are no other forces that can threaten Old Master. Half a month had passed since the Battle of Jimen Pass. During this time, Feng Zhen had eaten his fill and slept soundly. His days were comfortable. As a result, he had put on some weight recently. His skinny cheeks now looked a little meaty, and his complexion was rosy and healthy. Jiang Pingji said, "I'm not worried about my father." On the surface, Feng Zhen nodded, but he still insisted on his own opinion. His lord had been separated from his father for many years. It was not easy for them to spend some time together. Now that they were going to be separated again, she would definitely be reluctant. Jiang Pingji could tell that Feng Zhen didn't mean what he said. She couldn't be bothered to argue with him. The streaming room was lively as usual. Even if Jiang Pingji rarely interacted with them, they could still entertain themselves. Little chicken stewed mushroom. This war has been going on for a long time. I remember that the streamer had just left for the Alliance conference, right before Chinese New Year last year. Now that she's back, it's almost summer. Now that I think about it, it's been half a year. Time really flies. In another half a month, my baby will be preparing for the college entrance exam. I've come to the live broadcast room to make a wish, hoping that the host will bless me and I'll be invincible in the college entrance exam. Mushroom stewed little chicken. College entrance examination party. You're not thinking of fighting for 3 years to simulate 5 years of college entrance examination, yet you're still in the live stream room. You're so open-minded. Luo Luo peanut candy. As someone who's been here before, I can tell you that this live stream is magical. You can always make your wishes come true here. Jiang Pingji had been on the road for the past 2 months. Every day she was on the road, and the content of her live stream was the same. The audience found it fresh at first, but after a long time, they were tired of it. Many old viewers chose to lurk and peek. Most of the bullet screen comments were new viewers. No one knew who started it, but Jiang Pingji's streaming room became even more powerful than the koi fish. Everyone spread the rumor that wishing for good luck. The audience's bullet screen content was getting further and further away from the main topic of the live broadcast, until an old audience member sent a question. Moyen Sang Yuan, I'm only worried about one thing right now. Has the news that the host is a woman reached Wanzhou? This bullet screen had caused quite a few people to lurk around. Everyone's nerves could not help but tighten. The streamer had taken care of the people around her, but her subordinates far away in Wanzhou were still in the dark. When they suddenly received the news that their lord had changed from a young man in the prime of his life to a young lady, wouldn't they explode? In fact, this pot had already exploded. When the news that Jiang Pingji had become the Wanzhou magistrate spread to Wanzhou, everyone also received another major piece of news: the lord was actually a wife. To them, the impact of this news was no less than the earthquake in Shangjing. All of Wanzhou was in an uproar. Everyone pinched their arms and grimaced in pain. Only after confirming that they could feel the pain did they know that they were not having a nightmare. Su Ku was so shocked that he miscalculated the accounts. Looking at the messy accounts, he could only endure the throbbing pain in his temples and make another one. How can the Lord be a woman? From work to work, the same question lingered in his mind. Was he having a nightmare? Qiguan Rang went to Su Ku and asked him in private. You've been with the Lord the longest. Don't you have any suspicions? When Qiguan Rang received the news, his attitude was still relatively calm. He had a faint thought in his heart, as expected. Faced with Qiguan Rang's questioning, Su Ku suddenly widened his eyes and said in an extremely aggrieved tone, How can I doubt it? How could a normal person suspect that the young man recognized by others was a young girl? Nowadays, cross-dressers were everywhere. The men of the aristocratic families wore flowery hairpins and powdered hair and wore red and green clothes. The chances of Su Ku recognizing them were even lower. Your madam didn't leak any information? Qiguan Rang was flabbergasted. It was fine if others didn't recognize her, but Su Ku, who was part of Jiang Pingji's first batch of subordinates, was still kept in the dark. It was really inexcusable, not to mention that Su Ku's wife was their lord's personal maid. Qiguan Rang's question stumped Su Ku. He was stunned for a moment. He carefully recalled what Sun Mei had said, and his expression became more and more interesting. He stammered, "I vaguely mentioned it, but how could a normal person think in this direction?" Qiguan Rang secretly rolled his eyes. Who could he blame? If they wanted to blame someone, they could only blame their lord for being too manly. They couldn't blame their subordinates for being blind. When Feng Jin received the news, he was in a good mood. How could he not be happy? He couldn't be too happy when he saw the dumbfounded expressions of his colleagues. For so many years, he had been guarding the secret that no one else knew. He had long been stifled. This happy mood lasted until he got off work and returned home. Wei Jingxian said, "What happened to make Huayu so happy?" Feng Jin took over Changxing, who was getting heavier from Wei Jingxian's arms. He hugged his chubby daughter and didn't even care that his daughter was tugging at his cheek. "Jingxian, there are two pieces of great news," Feng Jin said with a smile. "First, Lanting has been appointed as the governor of Wanzhou. Second, she has regained her identity as a woman. From now on, we don't have to worry about her accidentally exposing her identity and causing unrest. How can I not be happy?" "Lanting?" Before Wei Jingxian could answer, the chubby daughter in her arms began to speak. She had only said 2 words when transparent saliva flowed from the corner of her mouth. "Don't be rude. Don't call her by her name." Feng Jin took the handkerchief from his wife and gently wiped away the saliva for Changxing. "Lanting." Changxing waited with her legs crossed. Her 2 black grape-like eyes sparkled as she babbled, "Huayu." Changxing was stubborn. The more Feng Jin opposed something, the more she liked to go against it. "That's my lord." Feng Jin laughed and gave his daughter a slap on her butt. This girl was getting bolder. She even dared to call her father by his name. "My lord," Changxing proudly learned. Her speech was still incoherent. Often she could only say 2 words. "That's right. Don't be rude when you see my lord in the future." Wei Jingxian was overjoyed to see the father and daughter talking like chickens talking to ducks. Changxing didn't know what she was laughing at, but she also giggled happily. The atmosphere of the family of 3 was very good. The other single dogs were a little pitiful. For example, Zhang Ping. As a skilled craftsman, he spent most of his time in the woodworking workshop. He was obsessed with craftsmanship and had no distractions. When he received the news, Zhang Ping's brain seemed to have rusted. He almost couldn't wrap his head around it. "Who did you say is a woman?" For the whole day, Zhang Ping seemed to be sleepwalking. He couldn't remember what he did at all. When he returned home, the first thing he did was to rush to his neighbor's house. He forgot to mention that his neighbor was Wei Ci. "Zixiao, my lord is actually a woman." Thinking that the person who went up and down the mountain with him, looking for wells, digging ditches and building reservoirs was actually a woman, he was completely dumbfounded. What was wrong with this world? Was he still having nightmares? He thought that Wei Ci's reaction would be violent. He didn't expect him to just raise his eyebrows lightly and say, "You know." Zhang Ping was strangely silent. It was the season where spring and winter intersected. The weather changed rapidly. Wei Ci was naturally sick for a few days. During this period of illness, Wei Ci stayed at home and couldn't go anywhere. Logically, he shouldn't have received the news so early. In other words, Wei Ci had long known that Lu Shi was a woman. That was why his reaction was so calm. "When did you know?" A bold guess emerged in Zhang Ping's mind. Wei Ci said lightly, "I knew when Jishan's hot spring came." "So early?" Zhang Ping's face twitched. He gritted his teeth and said, "You clearly knew that my lord is a woman. You still introduced me to her. Were you sincere?" Wei Ci's expression changed. He started coughing hysterically. He looked like he didn't have long to live. After a while, this guy started pretending to be dead. Zhang Ping was speechless. Chapter 803. Zhang Ping gritted his teeth. Why did he have such a friend who cheated his teammates? If the audience in the live streaming room saw this, they would probably be able to perfectly translate Zhang Ping's current state of mind. Hashtag every time I get cheated, I see my colleague pretending to be dead. Hashtag Wei CI. With your acting skills, it's such a waste not to work in the entertainment industry. Hashtag Zhang Ping looked at Wei CI, who was pretending to be dead, and spoke in an unfriendly tone. Wei Zixiao. You're still pretending? If you don't explain yourself today, I'll stay here and not leave. When dealing with a guy like Wei CI, one must not be thin-skinned. One must be more shameless than him. He was thinking about how to get back at him when he saw Wei CI lying motionless on the bed. His breathing was intermittent, and his chest rose and fell weakly. Did Zixiao's illness really act up? Realizing this, Zhang Ping's anger disappeared. He quickly went forward and pushed Wei CI, using his fingers to check his breathing. Upon checking, he was exhaling more than he was inhaling. Zhang Ping's heart sank. Zixiao. Zhang Ping immediately broke out in a cold sweat. Just as he was about to call for the doctor, the sickly Wei CI quietly turned his body sideways with his back facing Zhang Ping. He quietly pulled the brocade blanket covering his body towards his chin. How did he still look like he was about to die? Zhang Ping was speechless. The anger that had just subsided rose again. This kid was becoming more and more capable. He actually pretended to be sick in front of him and made him worry for nothing. Wei Zixiao. If you don't give me an explanation today, you and I will break off our friendship and never see each other again. Pretending to be sick? How could such a thing be faked? He did it on purpose this time. Who knew if it would be true next time? If the next time his illness really acted up and others thought he was acting, was this kid trying to get himself killed? Zhang Ping's tone was no longer calm. There was dignity in his anger. He was obviously serious. Wei CI smiled. He knew he could not continue to tease Zhang Ping. It was a small matter if the other party was angry. If he really broke off their friendship, it would be a big deal. He sat up with difficulty. His face was pale as usual. His lips were an unhealthy greenish-white. He looked sickly. I'm indeed sincere. Wei CI shamelessly admitted it. He asked, will Shiheng blame me for saying this? Zhang Ping calmed down a little. He had nothing to say in response to Wei Ci's question. To be honest, Zhang Ping would definitely not blame Wei Ci. What's done can't be undone. What's the use of blaming you? Our Lord is not a kind person. Who can get off this ship smoothly? What's more, you already knew that she was a woman. After some consideration, you still chose to assist her. It can be seen that in your eyes, this Lord is much better than ordinary feudal vassals. It's obvious that she's the wise ruler you've been searching for. I trust your eyes too. Zhang Ping and Wei Ci had known each other for many years. He was well aware of the latter's ambitions and aspirations. He was even more aware that Wei Ci's ideal ruler was too idealistic. He thought that Wei Ci would delay his official career until he was 30 years old. He did not expect that this guy would rush to the north in a hurry after receiving news of the earthquake in Shangjing. Out of worry for his friend, Zhang Ping escorted Wei Ci along the way. He was also puzzled along the way. What kind of person could make Wei Ci disregard his health and life and drag Chen Ke's sick body to seek refuge with them? When he saw Jiang Pingji, Zhang Ping did not feel much at first. It was only after several interactions that he realized that Wei Ci had found the right person. The wise ruler that Wei Ci was looking for was not only an ambitious and ruthless person who could run amok in a chaotic world, but also someone who had a benevolent and loving heart. Zhang Ping sighed. He lifted this matter up high and gently put it down, letting Wei Ci off the hook. If you had known about this a long time ago, you would have at least revealed some information to me. Then I wouldn't be in such a sorry state today. Zhang Ping thought of his absent-minded state today and felt gloomy again. You didn't say anything because you were waiting for this day. You're happy to see others startled, aren't you? The feeling of knowing that no one else knew and only he could not feel too good. I've really wronged Ci. I wanted to say it in the past, but the time was not right. I could only delay it again and again. Zhang Ping suddenly chuckled. If he believed one more word from Wei Ci, he would write his name backwards. Wei Ci had been sick for the past few days. He was not well informed about the outside world. Shiheng, you said that the Lord's secret has been spread to everyone. What's the attitude of the others? Other than Feng Jin, who was in the know, the others were kept in the dark. Hearing such explosive news for the first time, he didn't know if they could accept it. Zhang Ping thought about it and briefly described the reactions of the others. Most of them were surprised and a few were frightened. As for the chaos that Wei Ci was worried about, there had been no signs of it so far. After listening, Wei Ci was relieved. Zhang Ping comforted him. Almost none of the people who serve the Lord are pedantic. Huayu, who has the strictest rules, reacted very calmly today. It seems that the Lord's gender cannot shake their loyalty. You don't have to worry about these people, but the people of Wanzhou. Jiang Pingji's subordinates were carefully selected. It was impossible for them to betray her just because she was a woman. However, it was hard to say for the ordinary people. They were the group that was most easily fooled by public opinion. They could be used as weapons if they were not careful. Wei Ci said, after the Lord left, all parts of Wanzhou were hurriedly selecting female soldiers to fill the women's camp. I even asked storytellers to write stories to promote the merits of the women's camp. After half a year, the people have already accepted it. When the Lord becomes a woman, they will at most cherish it for a while. Zhang Ping listened and nodded repeatedly. The atmosphere in Wanzhou was indeed more open-minded than in other places. Speaking of this, when will you finish writing the story? Zhang Ping frowned and could not help but urge him to update. Wei Ci's expression changed. His eyes drifted and he said, "Isn't I still sick?" He knew Jiang Pingji's plan and knew when she planned to restore her identity as a daughter. In order to minimize the impact, Wei Ci had thought of many ways. Expanding the scale of the women's camp and selecting female soldiers in Wanzhou was one of the solutions. To be on the safe side, he also thought of another way, controlling public opinion with entertainment. Speaking of which, he had learned this method from Her Majesty. Compiling a story in the marketplace and having storytellers tell stories in teahouses and taverns, using catchy, easy-to-understand books to attract ordinary people. Through this method, he could achieve the effect of controlling public opinion. It was an era where entertainment was scarce. Only high-ranking officials and nobles had the right to enjoy singing and dancing activities. The entertainment life of the people was almost zero. Even activities such as performing on the streets had not become popular yet. Under such conditions, the power of Wei Ci's move was huge. It was comparable to a nuclear bomb. Every day, there were people who persevered in waiting, surrounding the teahouses and taverns so tightly that not even a drop of water could trickle through. They eagerly waited for the content of the story to be serialized. Chapter 804. Zhang Ping sat next to Wei Ci and muttered, "I really don't understand why the people like the stories you write so much." Master Yuanjing's disciple was of such a high status, yet this fellow went to write stories from the streets. It was fine to write, but this fellow liked to whet people's appetites, squeezing out a little bit every day, making people's hearts itch. They wished they could lock Wei Ci in a small black room, give him a brush, ink, paper, and inkstone, and urge him to fill the table with bamboo slips every day. If he did not fill up, he would not be given food. After all, it's for the people to hear. If it's too choppy, they won't understand at all. Rather than that, it's better to use plain words. It's impossible for the people to be interested in content they don't understand. Since it's written for them, it's natural to cater to their habits. It can barely be considered an appreciation for both refined and popular tastes. If the people can understand and listen, then it's considered a success. In the eyes of outsiders, Wei Ci's actions were not proper. In reality, the school of novels was also one of the 100 schools of thought, but it was criticized and looked down upon. There was a saying in an ancient book, "The school of novels originated from the officials." Street talk was created by hearsay. In other words, the school of novels recorded the people's street talk and reported it to the higher-ups, but it was seen as unfashionable. In his previous life, Wei Ci was also prejudiced against it, but Her Majesty strongly promoted the school of novels and even supported a few famous scholars of the school. Her Majesty's actions provoked opposition and criticism from the imperial censor, but she did not care. Instead, she personally wrote a few books and used facts to slap the imperial censor in the face. Wei Ci thought about it carefully and realized her deep meaning. The school of novels was not necessarily unfashionable. Nowadays, the atmosphere was still rather open-minded. Some things could be done earlier, so there would be less resistance in the future. Hence, Wei Ci wrote a few short and medium-length novels under the pen name Layman Ziki. He had the plot and the content. The plot was full of ups and downs, continuous and broken chapters that made others want to strangle him. It was not the Jiang dynasty now, where novels were still scarce. They were few in number, and the content was difficult. Ordinary people could not understand them at all. After Wei Ci considered the content and 3 views of the novel, he diligently got to work. The first story was about a female ghost who was wronged when she was alive. She was pitied by the gods and returned to the world in 3 days to avenge herself. The main character was a female. The second chapter was about a talented scholar and a beautiful lady. The talented scholar was just a bystander while the beautiful lady was a strong man. The main character was a woman. The third chapter was an inspirational anti-Japanese war novel based on Duke Su of the previous dynasty. It mixed the character of the lord, and the protagonist was a woman. Then, the commoners unanimously believed that Layman Ziki was definitely a cute girl. Wei Ci, what was wrong? In short, under Wei Ci's promotion, a semi-official profession appeared in Wanzhou, a storyteller. Why was it a semi-official profession? This was because a storyteller could only have the right to tell stories in the taverns and tea houses in Wanzhou if they had the permission and stamp of the prefecture government. Not only could they receive tips from the people every day, but they could also receive a fixed salary from the prefecture government. As for those storytellers without a stamp, although they could also find a stall to make a living, the content of their stories could not involve Wei Ci's novels. As for those with improper views, inciting the people and fooling the world, they were even more forbidden. If they were caught, they would be fined. Since Wei Ci wanted to use entertainment to control public opinion, he naturally had to try to regulate this industry. At first, many storytellers were not willing, but Wei Ci's novels were very popular with the people. Not only did the men like to listen to them, but even the idle women who knitted their sweaters liked them. Ordinary storytellers were not qualified to tell these novels in Wanzhou. In order to make a living, the storytellers simply took the open road of the prefecture government. Needless to say, this policy of the prefecture government was very useful. Not only did it provide the storytellers with the latest and most popular novels, but it also provided a fixed salary. The storytellers no longer had to worry about how their families would eat if they did not receive any tips one day. However, Wei Ci was a single person after all. Writing novels was limited to a hobby outside of work. He could not spend too much effort. After thinking about it, he looked for Cheng Cheng. A novelist? Cheng Cheng frowned. What do you want a novelist to write about? Wei Ci's literary talent was not low. Cheng Cheng really could not figure out why he was going through all this trouble. Wei Ci had no choice but to explain his plan. Ever since Cheng Cheng came to Wanzhou, he had been working hard on movable type printing and engraving printing. He also had to organize a large number of books that needed to be printed. He was very busy. To put it bluntly, Cheng Cheng could be considered an older otaku. He did not work and could not distinguish between the 5 grains of rice. He did not understand the deeper meaning behind Wei Ci's actions. Wei Ci had no choice but to tear this plan apart and explain it to Cheng Cheng in detail, hoping to get his support. As Wei Ci expected, Cheng Cheng did not agree at first and was even quite angry. In Cheng Cheng's opinion, writing books was a very serious matter. It was to educate the people and pass down a legacy for thousands of years. How could it be used for amusement? As for the novelist, Cheng Cheng also thought that it was a low-class profession. The paper produced was not used to record the history of civilization, but was instead used to torment these things. Cheng Cheng was so angry with Wei Ci that his beard was about to fly off. Cheng Cheng scolded Wei Ci harshly. When his anger subsided and Wei Ci explained in detail, Cheng Cheng's attitude slowly softened. Is this really as important as you say? Cheng Cheng's heart wavered slightly. Wei Ci sighed and said, Mr. Cheng, do you think ordinary people can understand the teachings of Confucius and Mencius? Even if you let the storyteller read it all day long, the people would not understand it. If they can't understand it, they will naturally not be interested. Only those that truly fit their current situation can be accepted by them. In my opinion, promoting vernacular books to ordinary people is not blasphemy. Mr. Cheng, please think carefully. Cheng's rationale was biased towards Wei Ci's words, but he still felt a little uncomfortable. As a last resort, Wei Ci could only take Cheng to a tea house. There happened to be a story being told there, and the people below were fascinated by it. Cheng looked at it and was silent for a while. Wei Ci said, Mr. Cheng talked to them about the teachings of Confucius and Mencius. Almost no one knows, but ask the people about the contents of the book. Even if they only heard it once, they could recite it as if it was their family's treasures. You can think that I'm being too unorthodox, but I still have to say this. Mr. Cheng wants to pass on your family's collection of books and spiritual treasures to future generations, but if the people can't understand it, it can only benefit a few people and not all future generations. The school of novels is indeed not popular, but times have changed. Mr. Cheng, why don't you watch from the sidelines and wait for a while? Cheng felt a flash of inspiration in his mind, so fast that he almost couldn't catch it. Forget it. I'll find a few for you. Cheng looked anxious and agreed to Wei Ci's request. By the time everything was on the right track, it was already early summer. The provincial government received news that their lord was already at the border of Wanzhou and would be back in half a month. Along with this news, Wei Ci also heard about the great victory at Jimen Pass and the capture of Fu Wang. Wei Ci raised his brush and paused. Ink dripped down, forming black dots. Chapter 805. What's wrong? You don't look too good. Is there something wrong with this Fu Wang? Su Ku rubbed his throbbing temples. Although his lord's transformation from a man to a woman did not cause a tsunami, there was still unrest in Wanzhou, especially among the landowning aristocrats of Xiangyang County. The Feng family had maintained a state of silence, but the other aristocratic families were constantly making small moves. This was considered the best news in recent days. Su Ku wanted to share it with Wei Ci, but he did not expect Wei Ci's reaction to be a little strange. Su Ku was curious and asked casually. It was this question that pulled Wei Ci into the quagmire of memories. Memories related to Fu Wang surfaced in his mind. I've heard of Fu Wang before. Wei Ci adjusted his state of mind and restrained the shock in his heart, so as not to arouse Su Ku's further suspicion. Su Ku said, from the information we received, Fu Wang seems to be a valiant general working for the Meng family. I only hope that he's someone who knows his place. The lord was a woman, so it was inevitable that she would bring some trouble. At this time, the internal department had to be more united and harmonious, and there could not be any different voices. Recently, Su Ku and the others had been worrying about it. The situation in Fengyi County and Qingde County weren't too bad. The former was where Jiang Pingji had established her power, and her foundation was the most stable. The latter had been devastated by the Red Lotus Group and didn't have any troublesome local bullies. Among the 3 counties in Wanzhou, Xiangyang County had the least control. In order to completely unify the forces in Wanzhou, they could only think of ways to suppress the aristocratic families of Xiangyang County, either by roping them in, alienating them, or making them unable to unite. As long as these people couldn't gather together and unite as one, these clowns wouldn't be able to do anything. At this time, Su Ku was most worried about internal unity. Wei Ci had given him a reassuring pill, which made Su Ku feel more at ease. He said, Fu Wang first served Fu Yang, and then he defected to the Meng family. In just a few years, he became the Meng family's most trusted general with his powerful martial strength. However, the Meng family was rather interesting. On one hand, they relied on Fu Wang, but on the other, they tried to rope him in and suppress him. It was quite a contradiction. With our Lord's magnanimity, she will definitely be able to take him in. As for Fu Wang's temperament, there's a little problem, but it's not a big deal. Hearing Wei Ci's words, Su Ku instantly felt much more at ease. As long as he wasn't a troublemaker who didn't fit in with the group, he wasn't worried. Suku then asked, "What's wrong with this person?" After all, they would be new colleagues in the future. It would be easier to get to know them in advance. Wei Si lowered his eyes slightly, his thick and long eyelashes casting two exquisite shadows. He smiled and said, "Fu Wang's biggest problem is that he is fickle." Suku exclaimed in surprise. What did she mean by capricious? He thought that only women could be described as fickle. If it was applied to a man, then it meant that the man. Suku frowned. "You're saying that this person is disloyal?" If he was disloyal, how could this be considered a harmless fault? He had a good impression of Fu Wang and did not want him to be ostracized by Suku because of this. It can't be considered disloyal. Xiaoyu also knows that Fu Wang is a child raised by a pack of wolves. Wolves were far more straightforward than humans. They respected and supported the strong. This was an innate instinct. Once the master is weak and the subordinate is strong, he might not be convinced. Speaking of his previous life, Fu Wang's experience was quite interesting. It could be called a model of job hopping. Fu Wang was adopted by Fu Yang at first. He was Fu Yang's right-hand man and half his son. The father-son relationship was very deep. Later, Fu Yang died of old injuries. Fu Wang brought Fu Yang's old subordinates to seek refuge with the Mengs. They still lived well. The main point was that the master of the Mengs died of malaria. The heir was a good-for-nothing. He failed miserably and was finally abolished by Fu Wang. After Fu Wang took over the power of the Mengs, he accepted Prince Changshuo's recruitment and became his most trusted general. However, Prince Changshuo was also a good-for-nothing. He was a blind man. Logically speaking, Prince Changshuo's camp was full of talents. There was Qiguan Rang in the literary field and Fu Wang in the military field. Even if he could not become a powerful feudal lord, at least he would not die so tragically. However, this fellow had just gained a foothold and was arrogant. He was surrounded by a group of sycophants. Not only did he alienate Qiguan Rang, but he also threw him into prison. He was guarded against Fu Wang and even dreamed of taking away his military power. To his delight, Qiguan Rang ruthlessly killed his old master and opened the city to welcome Her Majesty. As for Fu Wang, this fellow had sharp senses. He predicted danger ahead of time and found an excuse to retreat with his troops. He sought refuge with the next family. Do you know who the next family is? The next family is the Su brothers from Zhe County. The younger brother, Su Fei. Did everyone think that this was the end of the job hopping? Of course not. Fu Wang first sought refuge with Su Fei. However, Su Fei was a funny man. Not only did he use his military power, his governance was also a mess. He caused the wilderness to stretch for thousands of miles and the people had no way to live. Even when Fu Wang joined with his troops, he was still unable to turn the tables on Su Bei. In the end, he still lost. After Su Fei lost, Fu Wang accepted Su Bei's recruitment. Speaking of this, there was a small incident that had to be mentioned. Su Bei's strategist, Han Yu? Yes, he was Wei Si's senior apprentice brother in name and one of Master Yuanjing's outstanding disciples. Han Yu said, Fu Wang is a violent person with few responsibilities. He is arrogant and lacks loyalty. He is a capricious villain and cannot be used. If it wasn't for the fact that Su Bei lacked capable subordinates at that time, Fu Wang might have been killed. Because of this dispute, Fu Wang and Han Yu had a very bad relationship and had frequent conflicts. Later, when Su Bei was defeated by Her Majesty, he used some tricks to recruit them. Han Yu still cared about his old master and rarely gave advice to Her Majesty. Fu Wang, on the other hand, seemed to have been injected with chicken blood and had a second spring. At that time, many people were waiting for Fu Wang to jump ship again. In the end, Fu Wang led a team of tigers and wolves. As for Han Yu, he was cautious by nature and did things meticulously. If it weren't for that incident, he would probably have died of old age. What incident? Han Yu's wife was from a prominent aristocratic family. Her family background was extremely high. However, Her Majesty had affected the fundamental interests of the aristocratic family and had reduced their power over and over again. A few aristocratic families had secretly joined forces and wanted to overthrow the palace. After all their efforts failed, Han Yu was implicated and committed suicide to escape punishment. Fu Wang was ordered to confiscate the property of the traitor. Han Yu was also implicated. He felt humiliated and wrote a 10,000-word confession letter and committed suicide by swallowing gold. It had to be said that the dispute between Han Yu and Fu Wang had an inexplicable sense of déjà vu. Before Han Yu died, he secretly sent a letter to Wei Ci. Every word was written with blood and tears. Wei Ci had mixed feelings when he read it. After reading the whole letter, there was only one feeling: Han Yu died unjustly. When Han Yu was young, his family was involved in an unjust case. As a result, his family fell into disgrace. At the same time, his temperament changed drastically. After the establishment of the Jiang Kingdom, he was entrusted with the important task of revising the law. Chapter 806. This life was interesting. Not only did Han Yu's fate change, but he also avoided the tragedy of almost exterminating his family. Even Fu Wang entered the Lord's tent ahead of time. Wei Ci searched through Fu Wang's memories in his mind. He only remembered that he was a strong, burly, and energetic martial artist. It would have been better if Wei Ci hadn't mentioned it. Su Ke's brows furrowed tightly. According to what Zixiao said, Fu Wang is not a good person. I'm afraid he can't be put in an important position. Su Ke's influence on Fu Wang fell into the negatives. A person who could not guarantee his loyalty was a potential traitor. Wei Ci smiled and said, Xiao Yu's words are wrong. Not only will the Lord not let Fu Wang be idle, but she will put him in an important position. Su Ke couldn't help but say, but didn't Zixiao say that Fu Wang, he usually stayed silent, but once the Lord's power was weak, he would pounce and bite back. How could such an ingrate be used? Wei Ci's smile disappeared. His eyes were bright and full of confidence. He said, the Lord can subdue this wolf. Xiao Yu should be rest assured. Su Ke was speechless when he heard this. Wei Ci continued, don't be fooled by Fu Wang's rough personality. He is very meticulous and is best at capturing the emotions of others. If Xiao Yu has a grudge against him, he will know. He might not say it on the surface, but he might have a knot in his heart. He is a newly surrendered general and has only been with the Lord for a short time. He is not loyal. If he feels that he is being targeted, I'm afraid it will be more difficult to deal with him. Su Ke frowned. He understood Wei Ci's worries and could only say, I will take note of this. The new company still needed a period of probation to recruit people. In this era, Fu Wang was also a newcomer who needed to be observed. As an old man, Su Ke had the obligation to mediate internal conflicts. Even if they were not a family, at least they could not have unresolvable filth. Wei Ci knew the burden on Su Ke's shoulders. He patted him on the shoulder and comforted him. You will know when you meet him. Su Ke nodded. As the magistrate of Chongzhou, Lu Shi and Jiang Pingji did not take the same route to Wanzhou. The father and daughters separated halfway. When Jiang Pingji went to the alliance meeting, she only had a little more than 10,000. When she came back, she had nearly 20,000. The newly added soldiers were all elites. Yes, Fu Wang had surrendered. As for the details of his surrender, I won't go into too much detail. It can be summed up in a few sentences. What if a surrendered general doesn't surrender? Just a beating would do. What if a beating was still not enough? Beat him up again. Fu Wang boasted that his martial prowess was the best in the world, but he was captured by Dian Yen in his carelessness. When his injuries were more or less healed, he found out how he had knelt down. He had mistakenly ingested a large amount of sleeping grass. Fu Wang scratched his ears and cheeks, unable to figure out how he had mistakenly ingested sleeping grass to the point of making a mistake on the battlefield. Sleeping grass did not grow anywhere. Most of them grew in the Zhangzhou grasslands and were rarely seen in other places. In other words, the origin of the sleeping grass that Fu Wang ate was very suspicious. Adhering to the principle that even if he were to die, he had to die knowing the truth. Fu Wang went to find out the truth. However, the truth was too cruel. After he found out, he was dumbfounded. Heh, lust is like a knife above your head. Jiang Pingji mocked mercilessly. She used her body and spirit to attack Fu Wang. With this lesson, Fu Wang probably wouldn't dare to have any romantic affairs while marching in the army. In fact, if Fu Wang hadn't been too arrogant and believed that he would definitely win this round, he wouldn't have fallen for Huijuan's honey trap. Fu Wang felt that he needed some time alone. After a moment of silence, he asked Jiang Pingji, "What about the lady from that day?" Jiang Pingji snorted coldly. She felt that Fu Wang hadn't been tortured enough. He was still thinking about the beauty. "Why are you asking this?" Jiang Pingji glanced at Fu Wang coldly and nobly. It was one thing for this guy to pledge allegiance, but it was another for him to covet Huijun. In short, she wouldn't let Huijun continue to sacrifice herself. Her priority was to throw Fu Wang, the wolf, out of the sheep pen. Fu Wang said, "A day as husband and wife means 100 days of love." Jiang Pingji was speechless. Before she could react, the audience in the streaming room added fuel to the fire. The bullet screen was unusually meaningful. Mo Lingen, "A day as husband and wife means 100 days of love." Is the day, in this pervert's words, a verb or a noun? Late obsessive-compulsive disorder. Whether it's a verb or a noun, this wolf wants to covet this lady. I can't tolerate it. Continue to beat him. Juyue Xinga, I absolutely can't tolerate it. Jiang Pingji took a deep breath. She looked at Fu Wang and called him by his surname and courtesy name. Fu Jingtu, that's my personal maid. In the aristocratic families, personal maids were mostly reserved concubines of their male masters. If there were no accidents, most of them would be taken in. Fu Wang was surprised for a moment. His expression became a little ugly. He immediately slapped his forehead and said, "My lord, you're not a woman?" If Jiang Pingji was a man, her words would be a warning to Fu Wang not to covet a woman who didn't belong to him. But his lord was a woman. Fu Wang was still very upright. Only men and women could have a future. Women and women had a pure relationship. Jiang Pingji retorted, "Can you beat me? Don't talk nonsense if you can't beat me." Fu Wang was speechless. If he still didn't understand, he wouldn't have lived until now. His lord was protecting Huijun. She didn't want him to have any further involvement with her. Fu Wang felt a tightness in his chest. There was an indescribable discomfort in his heart. He wanted nothing more than to vent his anger violently. What a coincidence! "My lord, please give me some pointers." Fu Wang issued a challenge to Jiang Pingji. Yang Si and Feng Zhen, who had rushed over after hearing the news, looked helpless. Compared to their helplessness, the other soldiers seemed to be on steroids. They surrounded a huge field and watched the fight. Fighting easily made one's adrenaline soar, not to mention that both parties were good at martial arts. Seeing that the fight between the two was getting more and more exciting, the situation was getting more and more intense, the surrounding soldiers lost their composure. One by one, they shouted and cheered. Fu Wang's old subordinates naturally supported their general, but Jiang Pingji also had a group of die-hard fans. When the fight between the two reached its climax, the cheers and cheers of the soldiers resounded through the sky. They were so noisy that even the guards outside the tent could hear them. The atmosphere was extremely lively. To outsiders, Fu Wang and his lord were evenly matched. It was very intense. As the person involved, Fu Wang had an unspeakable bitterness. He could feel that his opponent hadn't used her full strength at all. She looked tired and sweaty, but she looked like she was at ease. The feeling of punching with all her strength but hitting cotton was not a good one. Why didn't Jiang Pingji defeat Fu Wang? Instead, she was evenly matched with him. Firstly, Fu Wang's reputation among his old subordinates was too high. As long as Jiang Pingji fought to a draw with him, it would be enough to earn the favor of the surrendered soldiers. Secondly, by the same logic, if she easily won against Fu Wang, his old subordinates would definitely feel uncomfortable. They might even reject her. The current size was just right. She could publicize Jiang Pingji's reputation and make the surrendered soldiers accept her. At the same time, she could preserve Fu Wang's reputation. Fu Wang was carelessly punched twice in the face. There was blood at the corner of his mouth and his eyes were bruised. Hui Jun was embroidering children's shoes in a low-key manner in the tent. When she heard the thunderous cheers outside, she could not help but look around curiously. What happened outside? My lord and General Fu are fighting. They're fighting? Hui Jun rolled her eyes and asked, I heard that General Fu is brave and good at fighting. Is my lord injured? The person replied, My lord suffered some minor injuries, but it's not a big deal. Chapter 807. Am I hurt? Hui Jun was in a trance. When she came back to her senses, she felt a sharp pain on her fingertips. She gasped in pain. Looking down, she saw a bright red bead of blood on her fingertips. You're slightly hurt? Where are you hurt? Hui Jun forced herself to calm down. She put the embroidery needle and the half-finished shoes into the basket and was about to get up. I'm not hurt much. I was just scratched. Just stay here and don't run around. Jiang Pingji came over at that moment. Her face was flushed, and her cheeks and neck were covered with hot sweat. She looked like she had just been fished out of the water. When she came, the female soldier who passed the news blushed. She bowed and retreated reluctantly. Jiang Pingji was puzzled. Hui Jun was stopped by Jiang Pingji when she got up. She could only sit back down, but she did not stop talking. I heard you fight with that brute Fu Wang just now, didn't you? Where are you hurt? If not for her introverted nature, she really wanted to crawl over and examine Jiang Pingji carefully. Although Fu Wang was a boorish man, he was not weak in martial arts. He was tall and burly, like a small mountain. In comparison, her Langjun looked especially delicate and pretty. Two Langjuns together were not as strong as Fu Wang. How could Hui Jun not be worried? The weather was getting hotter. Jiang Pingji had already impatiently rolled up her sleeves and trousers. She still felt uncomfortable. She took the wet handkerchief from Hui Jun and wiped the sweat on her cheeks, neck, and arms. Only then did she feel slightly better. Jiang Pingji smiled and said, Don't listen to other people's hearsay. Where are you hurt? Her smile was too pure. Even others could be infected by her smile. They would even smile knowingly. That purity was not like a blank piece of paper. To be precise, it was the clarity of seeing through the affairs of the world. You're still denying it? Hui Jun looked carefully. Her sharp eyes noticed that Jiang Pingji's wrist was redder and swollen than usual. There were some finger marks. It was only because the sun was strong and her skin was tanned that it was not obvious. Apply some medicine to reduce the swelling. Looking at Hui Jun, who turned to look for medicinal wine, Jiang Pingji did not know whether to laugh or cry, but she could only let her be. Jiang Pingji held her chin with one hand. While waiting, she glanced at the streaming room that she had ignored for a long time. Today's live broadcast room was still very lively. Jiang Pingji and Fu Wang fought with their bare fists. The audience expressed that the streaming that day was of high quality. It was a martial arts blockbuster no matter how it was edited. More importantly, they were watching from Jiang Pingji's point of view, so they had a sense of immersion. They faintly felt the thrill of transforming into a peerless master and beating up a child. What was even better was that after beating the little kid up, there was a gentle and virtuous lady by his side who was concerned about his well-being. The viewers in the live stream were extremely envious. Why didn't they have such a gentle and virtuous lady by their side? Not to mention someone as gentle as Hui Jun, even if she only had 10% of her gentleness, it would be fine. Li Wushuang, the women around me can carry a 20-liter bucket of water and climb up and down. They are definitely tough women. Lao Siji Lianmeng, I'm so envious of the streamer. I watch the live stream every day. As a man, I want to raise the lesbian flag. Shui Mo Nian Nian, I feel like gender doesn't matter in the live broadcast room. As a senior Fujoshi, I really want to throw myself into the arms of romance. Drifting with the tide, little ding ding. Hee hee, whether it's romance, or Yuri, my streamer can do it easily. Do you believe that? Love 36 stratagems. I believe, of course I believe. My streamer is the Lord. Do you understand that she's the main attacker? Jiang Pingji could not help but sigh silently as she watched the live stream move in a strange direction without looking back. Hui Jun helped her untie the cloth that was wrapped around her right hand. The ugly black mark was tightly attached to her palm and the back of her hand, like a birthmark. She sighed and said, "The palace's secret prescription doesn't work either. It's still the same. Every time Huijun saw the black mark on Jiang Pingji's right hand, she felt the urge to have goosebumps all over her body, but Lang Jun did not care at all. Jiang Pingji said, "This isn't a suntan. The whitening powder you used naturally won't work." The black mark was the level 9 loyalty talisman. As long as the mark was still there, it could always attract the woman from another dimension. Huijun sighed and carefully applied some medicinal wine to reduce swelling on Jiang Pingji's wrist. While applying the medicine, she said, "Lang Jun, don't bother with that boorish man. He's a rough and worthless rock. It won't hurt if he bumps into it." No matter how much a rock was thrown away, it would not hurt, but if a fine scratch was added to the unparalleled beauty of the world, it would be heartbreaking. Jiang Pingji agreed verbally and looked at Huijun's lower abdomen. She said, "The conditions during the march were simple and crude. Fortunately, she was obedient." Huijun's cheeks turned red. Her appetite had been very poor these few days. Everything she ate felt disgusting and nauseous. Lang Jun told her that she really had a child in her stomach. "How long has it been? How can you be sure?" Due to the rules of the women's camp, Jiang Pingji did not want to reveal that Huijun was pregnant, so she did not hire a doctor to take Huijun's pulse. Huijun wholeheartedly agreed with Jiang Pingji's decision. Regardless of whether Huijun was a soldier of the women's camp or not, in the eyes of outsiders, Huijun was a female soldier of the women's camp. The women's camp was already very secular, and it was difficult for them to walk. If there was news that a woman in the military camp was pregnant, how could her reputation be maintained? Since she could not hire a doctor, Huijun could not be sure whether she was pregnant or not until Jiang Pingji gave her a definite answer. Jiang Pingji did not know how to take pulses, but her mental brain was strong and she was especially sensitive to mental aura. There was another weak mental wave on Huijun's body. This was a sign of a new life. In short, you still have to be careful. Don't tire yourself out on a daily basis. Although they did not rush on their journey, marching all day was tiring. For a pregnant woman who was still in her first month of pregnancy, it was enough to be fatal. Jiang Pingji could only let Huijun ride Little White. Even the saddle, reins, and stirrups on Little White's back were modified to make it as comfortable and light as possible. It looked a little gaudy. Fortunately, Little White's temperament was gentle. It did not make a fuss and was as obedient as ever. Huijun pursed her lips shyly. A gentle smile hung on her face, as if she was enveloped in a holy light. Jiang Pingji could not help but smile knowingly when she saw it. She sincerely hoped that this would be the starting point for Huijun's brand new future. She would not be entangled in the quagmire of the past. There were still 10 days before the slight heat. Jiang Pingji finally returned to the base camp that she had not seen for half a year. Half a year had passed. Qingda County, which had been ravaged by the flames of war and destruction, slowly regained its vitality. Young people who had escaped the flames of war returned one after another. Because they had caught the tail end of the spring plowing, the faces of the people there finally had a healthy blush and relaxed smile. Fengyi County was full of vitality. The wasteland that had been cultivated was already filled with crops. It was full of vitality. Farmer men and women plowed the fields while children played and frolicked. Qingan District was a small district that had been tried out in the first year of the method of stationing the fields. Now it had taken on a new look. Farming could be seen everywhere. Chapter 808. Wei Si's governance was indeed very good. The originally vague method of stationing land became a reality step by step under his arrangements. Based on the amount of land that had been reclaimed, if God gave them some face this autumn, not only would the food shortage in Wanzhou be completely solved, but there would also be enough surplus to support Jiang Pingji's army in 2 years of war. They would no longer have to scrimp on food and clothing, and the people would no longer have to starve to death. As for Xiangyang County, one of the 3 counties in Wanzhou, there was now a new atmosphere. Su Ku and the others were also smart. While they restrained the local gentry in Xiangyang County, they also thought of ways to win over the people and win their hearts. No matter how capable the gentry were, once they lost the power of public opinion, the right to speak, and the strength of their armed forces, they were just tigers without teeth. Feng Jin and the others fought back and forth with the local gentry in Xiangyang County. Although they did not bleed or get hurt, they were tired and their heads hurt. What was gratifying was that Jiang Pingji had become the official magistrate of Wanzhou. Outsiders could no longer use unjustifiable as an excuse to attack her. So what if she was a woman? The Lord was still the Lord. She could fight anyone who disagreed with her. As for the victory at Jimen Pass, the capture of the Meng's top general, Fu Wang, and his elite troops, that was just icing on the cake. Everything was going in a good direction. Jiang Pingji returned victorious. When they heard the news, the people watched the army enter the city with reverence, joy, and curiosity. Because Jiang Pingji was so close to the people, she often brought Zhang Ping and the others around, so the people were no strangers to her face. However, they still could not believe that such a handsome young man was a girl. So many beautiful women had their hearts set on her, but they did not expect her to be a girl. That was a big joke. On the day they entered the city, Jiang Pingji changed her clothes for the first time. She didn't wear a brown dress to deal with it. Instead, she wore a modified plain dress and combed her hair into a simple bun. Her thick black hair was like a black waterfall, parted in the middle, loosely covering her ears, and the rest of her hair was tied up in a bun at the back of her head. However, perhaps it was because of his attire, the once heroic young man looked a little more feminine now. The people were still stunned and rubbed their eyes, afraid that they were seeing things. They stared again and again, and they were sure that it was a woman. This time, the surrounding commoners were in an uproar as they discussed among themselves. Just as the soldier's jaw tightened and he put on a look as if he was facing a formidable enemy, fearing that the people would riot, a light pink handkerchief with a strong fragrance tied to a sachet flew into Jiang Pingji's arms. She caught it in front of everyone's eyes. Jiang Pingji held the sachet in surprise. She tied the handkerchief around her mouth into a beautiful and delicate bow. She did not need to open the sachet to know that it was filled with spices and not something to attack people. In other words, the owner of the sachet threw the sachet to express his love, and not because of the attack that the audience was worried about. Amused, she raised her head and looked in the direction the sachet came from. She met a pair of familiar eyes. Shangguan Wan glanced at her shyly, then covered her face and moved away from the window on the second floor under the watchful eyes of the crowd. Jiang Pingji laughed involuntarily and muttered to herself, "This girl," Liun, who was about 20 feet away from Jiang Pingji, expressed his hurt and his heart was broken. He had expressed his feelings to Shangguan Wan before he left for the war. Why was the one who received the sachet and confessed his feelings after returning from the war? "I feel wronged, I feel bitter, but I can't say it out loud." Liun's heart felt stifled. His handsome face drooped, like a rooster that had lost a fight. Shangguan Wan's action was like a command. All kinds of sachets, handkerchiefs, and fresh flowers swarmed over from the crowd. Cheers resounded through the sky. Fresh flowers lined the streets, the people's hearts. Jiang Pingji asked people to carefully keep the sachets, handkerchiefs, and other items. Among the crowd, Wei Ci heaved a long sigh of relief. "Thank you, Lady Wan, for your help." Even though he had made many preparations, Wei Ci was still worried that the people would not be able to accept his lord's gender. For this day, he had secretly asked Shangguan Wan to be his gunman. It was not right to say that she was his gunman. Even if Wei Ci did not look for Shangguan Wan, she had planned to throw the sachet at him, but she did not intend to be so high profile. How can Master Wei be so sure that once someone takes the lead, the people will jump with joy and cooperate? Shangguan Wan left quietly while the crowd was cheering. She happened to bump into Wei Ci, who was preparing to welcome Jiang Pingji. The people have a good impression of our Lord, but most of them follow blindly. If no one takes the lead, the others will only respond in silence. Wei Ci said calmly, "Lady Wan has set a precedent. The people who have long been prepared but dare not do anything will also be encouraged." He was afraid that one or two scumbags would sneak into the crowd, so he had asked the people guarding the city to be more vigilant. Fortunately, the result was good. The people knew how to repay kindness. The scenes that Wei Ci was worried about did not happen. He was relieved. Shengguan Wan sighed with a smile. Master Wei has planned a lot for Lanting. Hearing that, Wei Ci's earlobes were tainted with a suspicious red color, but Shengguan Wan did not notice. Even if she did, she would only think that it was because the weather was too hot. The king's worries and the minister's toil. The king's humiliation and the minister's death. As a minister, I should do my best and sacrifice my life for him. Wei Ci dealt with it calmly. Shengguan Wan could not help but feel moved by his noble character, unquestionable integrity, and loyalty. With the fragrance of horseshoes, she took off her armor and returned in brocade clothes. Amidst the cheers of the crowd, Jiang Pingji rode the tall and mighty little white through the main street. The soldiers on both sides of the road straightened their backs. Regardless of her appearance, just her vigorous spirit revealed the demeanor of a mighty leader. The cheers of the people grew louder and louder. Jiang Pingji was very popular, but the other generals who had won the war were not left out. Among them, Li Yun was the most popular. Unfortunately, there were thousands of sachets, but the one he wanted was not among them. #my grievance #welcome my lord. Everyone who could be there had arrived. Everyone had fully squeezed out their energy and physical strength. They had spared a few days just for this day. Jiang Pingji jumped off the horse and helped them up one by one. She said, "Thank you for your hard work." She did not spend much time fighting at the front lines. She was quite free when it came to making a fuss. Didn't you see that Feng Zhen had put on 2 sizes? In comparison, there were a lot of things to do in Wanzhou. The few people who stayed behind were the ones who were suffering. With her words, everyone's heart was at ease. It was as if they had poured a bucket of ice water during the hottest days of the year. Their whole bodies felt refreshed. After settling down the soldiers, Jiang Pingji could finally return to the district headquarters that she was familiar with. Honestly, even war was not so tiring. Therefore, whether it was money or this life, she did not like such a tiring scene. After entering the district headquarters, everyone sat on the left and right sides of the room. The atmosphere was a little awkward. It was because they were not used to it. Their lord had changed her gender when she went out. Thinking of their lord's previous style, they could not bear to look at it. Chapter 809. To be honest, a boss who didn't give people time to prepare would definitely be scolded by his subordinates in the world of the streaming room. Su Ku and the others weren't ordinary people. They were very serious about the work they were responsible for. How could they be said to be unprepared? Jiang Pingji asked everyone. The development of Wanzhou was better than expected. This couldn't be separated from everyone's busy work. Thus, she said, "You've all worked hard for the past 6 months. When the matters in Wanzhou are settled, I'll definitely let everyone relax for a few days." Except for a few ignorant newbies, the other old people had an expression that said, "You've all worked hard for the past 6 months. Rest days? Before saying this, spit out the 7 days of rest from last year's New Year. Not only were they complaining in their hearts, but the audience in the streaming room also helped to crusade against Jiang Pingji. She probably realized that what she said was a little fake, so she simply changed her method. Jiang Pingji's methods of rewarding people were nothing more than giving them bonuses, increasing their salaries, and giving them property deeds. When the newbies who didn't know what was going on saw it, they only felt that this lord was extremely generous and rich. In fact, let's not talk about it. It's all tears. Realizing that everyone wasn't in high spirits, Jiang Pingji decisively changed the topic and asked about the farming situation in Wanzhou. Farming had always been thrown to Li Yun. However, since Wei Ci, the all-rounder, joined, the matter of farming was thrown to him. Fortunately, this guy had the ability to multitask and work in 2 hands. Otherwise, he would have collapsed from exhaustion. Wei Ci was in charge of farming, so the job of presentation was naturally handed over to him. Wei Ci stepped out of the ranks. He kept his gaze slightly downwards, not daring to look directly at her face. Others felt that their lord's face was too out of character and felt uncomfortable looking at it too often. However, Wei Ci was afraid that the scene would bring back memories, so he became more and more immersed in the past. Her voice came from above his head. It wasn't hoarse, nor did it have any lingering tiredness. Instead, it was full of vigor and sonorous. In an instant, Wei Ci calmed his mind and returned to normal. His tone was calm as he truthfully reported the situation in the 3 counties and 9 districts of Wanzhou. He even made a rough estimate of the rice for the autumn harvest. Only old farmers who had farmed for many years could accumulate rich experience over the years and have a certain estimate of the harvest. It was evident how much effort Wei Ci had put into the matter of farming. Jiang Pingji said, "Zixiao, you've worked hard." The words, "stabilize Wanzhou," seemed light and airy, but they were actually extremely heavy. That was because this was not something that could be settled by destroying the Tsing-Yi army or the Red Lotus Group. Compared to the main factor, whether it was the Tsing-Yi army or the Red Lotus Group, they could only be classified as secondary factors. The foundation of stabilizing Wanzhou was to reduce the number of refugees. In other words, it was to give the refugees a way out, to let them return to the countryside and have a stable living space. The more refugees there were, the worse public security would be. When they gathered together, it was easy to cause unrest. If the Tsing-Yi army was annihilated, there would always be the White Shirt Army or the Yellow Shirt Army emerging. If the Red Lotus Group was annihilated, there would be the Green Lotus Group or the White Lotus Group rising from the ashes. The original intention of the army farming law was not only to solve the food shortage, but also to reduce the number of refugees and stabilize the situation. Wei Ci did a great job in this aspect. Jiang Pingji could not even think of anyone who could do it better than him. It was not only the method of stationing land, but also the post-war compensation that was given to him previously. Wei Ci was also conscientiously doing it. These things could not be accomplished overnight, and the amount of time and energy needed was unimaginable to outsiders. For Wei Ci, the 6 words she said were the greatest affirmation and reward for him, far surpassing all glory. Wei Ci took the opportunity to restrain his emotions and maintain his composure. Others might not be able to see the flaws, but Jiang Pingji secretly frowned. After asking about the situation of farming, Jiang Pingji asked about Luo Yue's military training and recruitment. Upon hearing the news, Luo Yue stepped out of the ranks and gave a concise and comprehensive account of the key points so that Jiang Pingji could have a general understanding. She said in surprise, "The number of the female battalion has increased a lot." After all, the female battalion was still in existence that had been criticized. Even in a place like Wanzhou, there were not many women who were willing to endure hardships to be female soldiers. Most of the female soldiers who were recruited previously had gone through war and suffering. Each of them had their own bloody past. Jiang Pingji had also deliberately controlled the recruitment standards for the female battalion, so the number of female soldiers had not increased. She did not expect that in the 6 months that she had been away, the size of the female battalion had increased by 1/3. It was a rapid improvement. When it came to the female battalion, Jiang Pingji naturally had to ask a few questions. Jiang Nongqin was fully in charge of the female battalion. Luo Yue only knew the general situation. He still had to ask her about the specific details. After not seeing her for half a year, Jiang Nongqin's skin was darker than before, but her brows were more resolute, like a wildflower in a thicket. Even though she had gone through hardships, she could still bloom proudly. Jiang Nongqin's requirements for the female battalion were far stricter than Jiang Pingji's. If she was satisfied, the development of the female battalion was obviously very good. As for the strange increase in the number of female battalion, this is due to Mr. Wei's efforts, Jiang Nongqin said. Jiang Pingji was stunned for a moment. She asked Wei Ci what he had done. Why did it affect the female battalion? After asking carefully, she found out that this fellow did not find it troublesome. He even tormented the storyteller and wrote some vernacular novels. It was this kind of vulgar thing that was unrefined in the eyes of others, but it actually made the people of Wanzhou obsessed. There were even many loyal listeners who believed in the characters written by Wei Ci. They all felt that it would be good if women could achieve success like the people in the novels. The content of the novels was too nonsensical and unrealistic, uncultured. Wasn't Su Gong, who was awarded the title of Marquis in the previous dynasty, a woman who was born as a general? Wasn't their lord, Lu Shi, a woman who was born as a general? Going back further, during the chaotic times of the 16 Kingdoms, there were countless famous heroines. The characters in Wei Si's novels all had archetypes. Under the influence of the novel, some people changed their prejudice against the female battalion. This also set a positive example for the reputation of the female battalion. Hearing this answer, not only was Jiang Pingji surprised, but the audience in the streaming room was also in an uproar. The pioneer of the vernacular novel, Wei Si, you're going to heaven. My husband Yi Buxiu, Beauty Ci should change his name. Just call him Lu Ci. Running Argon, God, Lu Si. Mr. Lu Sun is called Zhou Shuren, okay? Even if he changes his name, it should be Wei Shuren. Xinzue, am I the only one who is curious about the novel written by Beauty Ci? Is there any content that is like a veteran? My young valley master, Beauty Ci is such a reserved person. Why would he write that kind of indecent content? Even if he did write, it would be subtle and obscure. It's not as crude as you think. He directly wrote about reproduction. How vulgar and obscene. Summer departing Xianggu, reserved? For example, a golden hairpin knocks on a jade pillow, fragrant sweat drenches silk clothes. Or, indulge in love during the day, make friends with you in my dreams at night. Or, loose makeup, messy hairpins fall off. Not a single word is obscene, but the content is very obscene. Chapter 8:10. In a trance, everyone had an illusion, as if there was a dirty train roaring past their ears. They really didn't know where the other party found so many poems with so many connotations. Or were the ancients also experienced in terms of sex? Shameless Ji Qin Qin, crooked? Are you talking about demons and spirits? There's an experienced driver here. The situation is already out of control. The audience in the streaming room cheered for Wei Si. They were curious about how such an ancient gentleman, who stood tall like an orchid and smiled like the bright moon in one's arms, would look like when he wrote erotic stories. They were so curious that they couldn't wait to encourage Jiang Pingji to read it now. They would definitely catch up. As the saying goes, amateurs watch the show, while experts see the artistry. Jiang Pingji could see the deeper meaning behind Wei Si's move. In her opinion, simple and clear vernacular was an important part of opening the people's wisdom. She didn't expect Wei Si to bring it up in such a form. That's good. I'm afraid it's been hard on you these days. She smiled and gave affirmation. Fulfilling one's duty is the duty of an official. There's nothing hard about it. Wei Si still maintained a humble attitude, but he secretly breathed a sigh of relief. In the eyes of others, such vernacular novels were no different from saliva, but wasn't it also one of the channels for spreading words? The people couldn't understand it, let alone remember those awkward sentences. The simpler and more straightforward it was, the more it could be accepted by the people at the bottom. Everything had to be done step by step, steadily and surely. This was even more so when it came to opening the people's wisdom. Instead of forcefully instilling great principles into the people, it was better to hide the principles in stories and guide them to explore them. Of course, not every story could be spread randomly. Wei Si strictly controlled this aspect and even planned to gather a group of novelists to be in charge of this content. In order to expand his influence, he specially asked for Prime Minister Cheng's help. Now that he had the support of his lord, he was confident that he could do this better. As for those who criticized him behind his back for associating with unfashionable people, Wei Si smiled mockingly. He couldn't be bothered. Jiang Pingji asked around and had a general understanding of the situation in Wanzhou, but she looked around and her gaze fell on Qing Yuan, who was seated in front of her. She asked, Gong Liao, is Mr. Qing not here today? Cheng Yuan was Cheng Cheng's second legitimate son. His courtesy name was Gong Liao. He had been in Wanzhou for less than half a year, and his performance had been remarkable. Considering his age, he had done quite well. With a gentle and humble temperament and a sincere and meticulous way of doing things, He would be popular no matter where he was. Cheng Yuan replied, "My father caught a cold last night. He was checked by the doctor this morning, but his condition is very serious. He is still bedridden." There was a worried look on his face. It was obvious that Cheng was really sick. Jiang Pingji hurriedly asked, "Mr. Cheng fell ill? What did the doctor say?" Cheng Yuan said, "The doctor said that my father was too worried and busy, and the cold caused the accumulated illness." Advantage? Too busy? Jiang Pingji's expression froze, and she felt a little guilty. In the eyes of an outsider who didn't know the truth, Cheng must have fallen sick from exhaustion because she exploited him too much. But Jiang Pingji really didn't cheat Cheng. "How did you fall sick from exhaustion?" She frowned. Cheng Yuan realized that he had said something wrong and hurriedly tried to remedy the situation. "My father is getting on in years. Recently, he has been troubled by the annotations. My mother has tried to persuade him several times, but he refuses to rest." Cheng Yuan's face was full of a helpless smile. He said, "My father has a stubborn temperament. It is extremely difficult for others to shake his decision." Cheng fell ill not because Jiang Pingji exploited him too much, but because he overestimated his physical strength. He was busy and refused to rest. Yesterday, he was also busy until late at night. He took a cold shower because he was greedy for the cold, and he didn't pay attention when he slept. Then he fell ill. Jiang Pingji asked in surprise, "Annotations? What annotations?" Cheng Yuan said, "My father said that the annotations were inspired by Xixiao. The classics and historical collections are too obscure, and there is no unified sentence reading for each article. This causes the teacher to read sentences inconsistently when teaching students, causing them to misunderstand certain articles. My father has been thinking about how to mark simple and clear sentence reading, annotate the controversial articles, and lead the way for future generations." What was sentence reading? In ancient times, the place where the words stopped was called sentence or reading. Nowadays, the articles were all sentences. There were no so-called punctuation marks. The articles were stacked together. For example, if a web novel did not have any punctuation marks or paragraphs, what would that mean? Many sentences were passed from teacher to student. It was inevitable that there would be errors in the process of transmission. Some teachers even cherished their own knowledge and did not even bother to teach the students the correct sentence reading. It was really shocking. Cheng had been worrying about this matter for the past few days. Wei Si's vernacular words gave him some inspiration. Hard-tongued classical Chinese would cause people to have different understandings of the same sentence and thus lead to wrong interpretations. What about the most straightforward vernacular words? It could not be that there would be people who would chew on the words, take them out of context, and pass on the wrong understanding everywhere, right? If this annotation could be done well, the difficulty of students studying in the future would be greatly reduced, and many unnecessary misunderstandings would be avoided. However, there was no first place in literature and no second place in martial arts. The same article could be interpreted differently by different people. Cheng alone was not qualified to annotate all the books in the world. Even if he worked hard to do it, would others admit it? This was a difficult problem, and it worried Cheng. Another difficult problem was sentence reading. He planned to use symbols with a certain meaning to break sentences, but sentence reading could not be decided by one person's opinion. The same sentence with different sentences had completely different meanings. Cheng still had a lot of things to worry about. Under so much pressure, would Cheng fall ill? Whether it was sentence reading or annotation, any one of them could cause the scholars in the world to criticize him. To put it bluntly, who was Cheng? What right did he have to call himself the world's teacher? Yes, if these two things were really done, Cheng would definitely leave his name in history. To put it bluntly, all the students who benefited from him would regard him as a half-teacher. Jiang Pingji saw the internal trouble at a glance. She said, "This matter is indeed tricky. I'm afraid it will be difficult for you to do it alone. Why don't you wait for the situation in the north of Dongqing to stabilize before you publish the literature examination and invite the scholars in the world to participate in the grand event?" Cheng Yuan sighed. He and Jiang Pingji had the same opinion, but his father was too stubborn and would not turn back until he hit a brick wall. Only when the Lord's power was stronger would Cheng Cheng's words carry more weight, and he would encounter less resistance. He planned to persuade Cheng Cheng after his condition improved. This kind of thing was very likely to cause the world's scholars to criticize him. It was better to be cautious. By the time Jiang Pingji finished her work, the orange sun had gradually sunk into the horizon. Chapter 8:11. It was a celebration feast, but it was more like a welcoming feast. Today's main character wasn't Jiang Pingji, but the three newbies who had just joined the group. After Feng Jin and the others secretly observed them, they were quite satisfied with the other two, except for Fu Wang. Qi Kuang was originally a centurion under Yang Tao's command, but because of his inconvenient legs and ugly appearance, he had never been put in an important position. Because of these experiences, Qi Kuang had a quiet personality and didn't easily talk to people. He looked like a pragmatic person who didn't cause trouble. The forces in Wanzhou today needed people like him who lived a lot and talked little. At least they wouldn't cause trouble and easily get involved with people. Xiao Guang had originally worked under Su Pei's command, but because his presence was weak and his background wasn't good, he hadn't been put in an important position for many years. Compared to Qi Kuang, Xiao Guang was quite talkative and tactful. No matter what others said, he could respond. Plus, he was recommended by Feng Jin, so everyone had a good impression of Xiao Guang. Even if they didn't trust Xiao Guang, they had to trust Feng Jin, right? The only one who didn't fit in was Fu Wang. He looked like a lone wolf that had left the group, and there was an indescribable arrogance in his eyes. It wasn't that they didn't want to interact with Fu Wang, it was because he was too cold and full of killing intent. The only thing missing was the words, "Strangers do not approach," written on his face. Among everyone present, the only one who had some friendship with Fu Wang and was naturally kind to him was Meng Hun. "General Fu, it's so boring to drink alone. Let me toast you. Thank you for your advice back then." Meng Hun sighed in his heart and turned to toast Fu Wang, who was sitting next to him. Fu Wang was 5 or 6 years younger than Meng Hun, but his qualifications and achievements were far higher than Meng Hun's. It was only right for the latter to be modest. "You and I are of the same generation, so there's no need to be modest." Fu Wang glanced sideways and saw the kind smile on Meng Hun's face. The unhappiness in his heart mostly dissipated. He picked up the wine cup on his table, and the two of them downed the wine in one gulp. Meng Hun wanted to sound out Fu Wang. It wasn't that he was gossipy, but he wanted to use this opportunity to help Fu Wang integrate into Wanzhou as soon as possible. He smiled and said, "Since General Fu has said so, I won't be modest. If we can be friends of the same generation, of course, I'd be more than happy." Fu Wang did not utter a word and poured himself a cup of wine. Meng Hun asked, "You didn't look worried just now. Did you encounter something difficult?" Fu Wang said with slight disappointment, "Since it's a celebratory banquet, there's no singing and dancing to liven things up, and there's no music to warm things up. It's really boring." Hearing this, Meng Hun smiled awkwardly but politely. Singing and dancing? His lord was too stingy. She didn't pay for dancers and singers at all. She wanted to see the content of the performances at the banquet? All right, I'll go prepare it myself. Thinking of his lord's conduct, Meng Hun felt powerless. He couldn't help but lower his voice and complain, "I'm afraid it's impossible for General Fu to watch singing and dancing." Fu Wang raised his eyebrows, his gaze becoming more serious and inquisitive. "What do you mean? My lord always says that she doesn't feed idlers, so why would she be willing to spend so much money on singers and dancers? If General wishes to see a song and dance, I'm afraid that you can only watch a group of men playing with their throats, or Han Mei brandishing his spear, or Dian Yen brandishing his axe. Zixiao's painting skills are not bad, and Huaiyu's zither skills are outstanding." Fu Wang. If Fu Wang's inner voice could be translated into subtitles, it would probably be, he felt that he had entered an abnormal group of crazy demons. She could even skip singing and dancing, and she even asked her subordinates to prepare their own entertainment programs. Such a lord would be doomed sooner or later. That the Fu Wang suddenly remembered that Meng Hun had been with Jiang Pingji for a long time, dating back to when Jiang Pingji was still an ordinary scholar. His attitude changed because of this, and he became closer to Meng Hun. "There's something I want to ask you in private?" Fu Wang approached Meng Hun and lowered his voice. The surroundings were filled with the noise of drinking, and laughter. His and Meng Hun's movements were inconspicuous. Meng Hun suddenly became more spirited. He said, "General, you don't have to be so polite. As long as it's something I know, I won't hide it from you." Fu Wang thought about it and asked a little embarrassedly, "Do you know how many maids the Lord has?" Meng Hun. He had been mysterious for so long just to ask such a question? Meng Hun coughed lightly and thought carefully. He was afraid that Fu Wang had taken a fancy to the maids around his lord. If that was the case, it would be difficult. Thus, he said with some uncertainty, "I remember there are only 3, right?" "Which 3?" Fu Wang perked up and his eyes lit up. Meng Hun's heart sank. He hesitated and said, "One is Lady Nongqin. Look, she's the one at the banquet. One is Xiaoyu's wife, Xuanmei. However, Xiaoyu's wife is still in Hejian County and hasn't come. The other is Lady Takshu. She's the steward of the Lord's inner court." Did Fu Wang take a fancy to one of them? "There's no Lady Hui?" Fu Wang almost couldn't wrap his head around it. Wasn't Hui Jun the Lord's maid? Meng Hun was surprised. "Lady Hui? I'm not sure about Lady Hui's situation. She only appeared by the Lord's side after the imperial city of Qinzhou. It's hard to say whether she's the Lord's maid or not. But looking at the Lord's attitude, I'm afraid he values Lady Hui a lot." Hui Juan's existence had always been mysterious. Meng Hun had known of her existence a long time ago, but he had only really met her after the rescue of the emperor. He used this to send a hint to Fu Wang: as long as the Lord valued someone, the subordinates should not have the slightest bit of covetousness. Even if their lord was female, this rule would still apply. Fu Wang asked, "Do you know where Lady Hui is now?" Meng Hun felt the hairs on his back stand up. He laughed dryly and probed, "General, have you taken a fancy to Lady Hui?" Fu Wang said calmly, "Of course not. I'm just curious." Meng Hun secretly heaved a sigh of relief. He didn't want Fu Wang to fall because of a woman. No matter how he looked at it, if he had a conflict with the Lord because of Lady Hui, he would be looking for trouble for himself. At the banquet, Wei Ci seemed to be chatting and laughing with Feng Jin, but his attention was on Jiang Pingji. Feng Jin saw that he was absent-minded and followed Wei Ci's line of sight. He suddenly raised his eyebrows and there was some interest in his eyes. "Zixiao, why are you looking at the Lord like that?" Feng Jin's sudden question scared Wei Ci so much that his fingers paused. The wooden chopsticks in his hand hit the edge of the bowl, making a crisp sound. "Why you scared me?" Wei Ci put down the wooden chopsticks with a normal expression and said, "I'm just curious." "Curious about what?" Feng Jin was puzzled. "The Lord has been staring at General Fu since just now. Her gaze is a little unfriendly. I don't know what General Fu and Captain Meng said to make the Lord so unhappy." Wei Ci said gently, "These two are also slow. They didn't even notice that the Lord has already noticed them." Feng Jin's gaze fell on Jiang Pingji and then followed her line of sight to Fu Wang and Meng Hun. The main hall of the banquet was not small. No matter how much Feng Jin concentrated, he couldn't hear the conversation between Meng Hun and the others. How do you know that the Lord heard what they said? Maybe she felt that the two of them were putting their arms around each other's shoulders, so she used her gaze to warn them? Wei Ci smiled and said, "The Lord has excellent hearing." They thought that they were speaking softly, but the Lord definitely heard them. Chapter 8:12. Feng Jin was strangely silent for a moment and asked, "How good is it?" Wei Ci said with a smile, "Let General Fu and Captain Meng whisper at the door. My lord can hear them clearly." Feng Jin was speechless. At that moment, Feng Jin looked at Meng Hun and Wei Ci with some sympathy. They thought they were whispering and no one else heard them, but they didn't know that their lord heard them all. Should we remind them? If we let them talk like that, it's hard to guarantee that they won't say something wrong after drinking. If something happened at the celebration banquet, they might be used by someone with ulterior motives. Wei Ci also lowered his voice. Of course, leave this matter to me. Feng Jin inadvertently looked up and happened to meet Jiang Pingji's gaze. He was so scared that he almost threw the wine cup in his hand. According to Wei Ci, the Lord had excellent hearing. She could hear Meng Hun and Wei Ci's whispering, so naturally, she could also hear his conversation with Wei Ci. He was about to remind Wei Ci not to be impulsive, but before he could speak, he received a warning look from Jiang Pingji. Feng Jin silently swallowed the words that were on the tip of his tongue. It's better for you to die than for me. In such a short time, Feng Jin sold Wei Ci out without hesitation. Wei Ci didn't understand. He stepped forward and said, "My lord, I sent people to build the Green Jade House last year. Now there are more than 10 acres of farmland. 2 days ago, the tenant farmers in charge of farming sent the ripe fruits to the district headquarters. It's being frozen in the well now. Why don't we take it and have a taste?" Jiang Pingji thought for a while before she remembered what Wei Ci was referring to. The Green Jade House was commonly known as watermelon. Last year, she planted a small half-acre of watermelon in the district headquarters garden. The yield was not much, only enough for her and her subordinates to have a taste. Later, she felt that watermelon could be grown by the people and made money, so she planned to let some experienced tenant farmers take care of it. Unexpectedly, it was successfully planted this year. Calculating the time, it was indeed the season for watermelons to ripen. After Jiang Pingji agreed, Wei Ci asked the kitchen chef to fetch the watermelon from the well. He opened the watermelon with a knife, and the bright red flesh gave off a cold air. Watermelons were either cut into slices or split in half and eaten with a spoon. But these two ways of eating were too vulgar. Wei Ci could not imagine a gentleman like Feng Jin holding half a round watermelon in his left hand and holding a spoon in his right, scooping out a big piece of watermelon pulp and stuffing it into his mouth. That scene was too beautiful, he could not bear to imagine it. Thus, he instructed the chef to cut off the skin of the melon and cut the pulp into small pieces, placing them on a small plate. It was convenient to eat and also very pleasing to the eye. More than 10 mu of watermelons have been planted. What's the yield of each mu? Watermelons could only be found in small countries in the western region. If Gu Xian had not brought a few live seedlings to Jiang Pingji would not have been able to eat them. Apart from the few newcomers, the rest of the people present had only eaten a little last year. Wei Ci reported, 1 mu has about 5,000 caddies. 5,000 jin? When everyone heard this number, they were speechless. This production was really high. Fu Wang ate a small piece. The sweet melon flesh brought with it an ice-cold chill, making him feel refreshed. Why is it all water? Looking at the pieces of melon flesh, he thought that it was like an ordinary fruit. Who knew that when he bit into it, it was all juice? But the fruit was quite delicious, and he finished a plate in a short while. Watermelons are like this. They quench thirst and relieve heat in summer. Jiang Pingji was quite satisfied with the yield of watermelons per mu. With the current agricultural methods, it was considered a bumper harvest to be able to produce 5,000 caddies per mu. If she turned on the live stream, the audience would agree with her idea. In the world of the live stream audience, the yield per mu was about 7,000 to 10,000, depending on the type of watermelon. Jiang Pingji asked again. Tenant farmers have been planting for a year, so they should have some experience. If we plant the watermelons for the people, can they grow them? Watermelons had a high yield, were delicious, and were rare. There should be a market for them. If the people were to plant some, they would definitely benefit a lot. The premise for large-scale planting was that this thing could not be pretentious. Otherwise, if the people responded to the call to plant watermelons, but because of their lack of experience, the watermelons would all die. Wouldn't it be a huge loss? Wei Ci responded smoothly, as if he had already expected this question from Jiang Pingji. He replied seriously, tenant farmers have been taking care of it for a year, so they have some experience. This thing likes to be dry and not wet. It likes sandy soil more than clay. If the weather is cloudy and the fields are too wet, the watermelon seedlings are prone to diseases. It might even affect the yield when it matures. Jiang Pingji ate the watermelon while thinking. Let's talk about this in detail tomorrow. She already had a general plan in mind. She planned to discuss it in detail with a few subordinates the next day and sort out a plan. It was a celebratory feast, so it was not suitable to talk about such serious matters. Because Jiang Pingji did not like noise, the crowd did not play for too long, so the celebratory feast ended earlier. Jiang Pingji asked someone to prepare hot soup to wash away the sticky sweat and smell of alcohol on her body. When she entered the backyard, she saw Hui Jun sitting in the room, embroidering. There were 2 round watermelons on a plate not far away. She frowned. She did not remember asking someone to send watermelons to Hui Jun. Although this thing had the effect of urinating and detoxifying, it was cold in nature. Pregnant women could eat it, but not too much. Who sent this? Jiang Pingji asked. When Hui Jun saw Jiang Pingji coming over, she stood up and bowed. Then she asked doubtfully, "Didn't you send this?" Jiang Pingji did not comment. She called the servants over and found out who had sent it. After the celebratory feast ended, she gave everyone an extra 2 watermelons. There were too few watermelons at the feast, so they could not eat to their heart's content. The 2 watermelons on Huijuan's side were a gift from Fu Wang. He really knows how to present Buddha with borrowed flowers. After muttering a few words, she turned her head and told Huijun not to be greedy and eat too much. The doctor came to take a look today? What did he say? Huijun said, the doctor said that the fetus is not very stable. It should be because of the continuous days of marching. He will be fine after resting for a while. Her body's foundation was good. She would be able to stabilize after resting for a while. Takshu has made arrangements for the inner court. You just need to take care of the fetus, Jiang Pingji said. Embroidery hurts the eyes. Don't do this at night in the future. Huijun smiled faintly. You are more meticulous than me as a mother. Jiang Pingji said, after all, you are the child's future godmother. As the mother, you are not attentive. As the godmother, I have to be more attentive. Regardless of whether it was in her previous life or this one, she had always been in awe of new life. After all, new life was the future. The night was dark, but all the houses were still brightly lit. No one was asleep. Why isn't Changxing asleep yet? Feng Jin had a lot to say to his wife, but the little ancestor, Changxing, stayed in their room and refused to move. Changxing's stomach hurts. Mother, give it a rub. Changxing lay in Wei Jingxian's arms. She propped up her round little belly. Wei Jingxian's hand rubbed her belly with a moderate amount of force. You're already so big. Can't you restrain yourself from eating less? Feng Jin sighed. His daughter was young, but her weight was not small. From afar, she looked like a ball. Although a chubby child was cute, he always felt that Changxing was too fat. Chapter 8:13. No matter how likable his daughter was, she was still a naughty child. Feng Jin simply threw the child to the wet nurse and let Changxing go back to her room to sleep. Changxing's diet has to be more restricted. If she gets any fatter, she won't be able to watch. Feng Jin felt that he should be more ruthless. Which woman of the Feng clan didn't go through such a life? If he couldn't indulge her, he would be harming her. After a period of time, I will write another letter to Big Brother and ask him to help me find a female teacher with a better temperament. Changxing is still young, but enlightenment should be put on the agenda. In the end, he still doted on his daughter. Feng Jin felt that the teacher's temper was far more important than his talent. A teacher for a day, a father for a lifetime. The teacher was a teacher. As a student, Changxing could not disobey him. However, Changxing had been spoiled by the couple since she was young. She had a bad temper. If she was punished by the teacher for being mischievous, their hearts would ache. Choose someone with a good temper, or at least a higher tolerance level. At the mention of enlightenment and rules, Wei Jingxian's face changed. She hesitated and said, but Changxing is still young. Feng Jin's heart wavered. In the end, he gritted his teeth and said, just because she's young doesn't mean she's immature. You and I can't indulge her. In the era where 13 or 14 years old could start a family and start a career, Changxing was already 2 years old. Indeed, she was not considered young. If it was in the Feng family, when a child could speak fluently, he would be initiated to read and learn the rules. How could he be as leisurely as Changxing? Look at her daily eating frequency. If she didn't gain so much weight, it would be a waste of the fat on her body. Moreover, the earlier Changxing becomes sensible, the more leisurely you will be. He was a man with a wife and a daughter. Why was he living like Su Ku, alone in an empty room every night? No matter how unwilling Wei Jingxian was, she could not object. Feng Jin doted on his daughter. How could he harm Changxing? Parents love their children and have far-reaching plans. Feng Jin had to ask Changxing if she was willing or not. Nanny, Changxing was wronged as she was carried back to her courtyard by the wet nurse. She took off her clothes and laid on the couch. The wet nurse helped her cover the brocade quilt. "What's wrong, madam?" The wet nurse was a gentle and dignified woman. Although she was called a wet nurse, in fact, Changxing grew up drinking Wei Jingxian's breast milk. This wet nurse was only responsible for taking care of Changxing's daily life. "Does your stomach still feel uncomfortable?" Her parents indulged her, so Changxing could eat whatever she wanted every day. She had more than 5 or 6 meals a day, and snacks before bed were a must. "Father," Changxing pouted, feeling wronged. "You don't want Changxing anymore?" The wet nurse was startled. With a panicked expression on her face, she hurriedly said, "Eldest lady, you can't say such things carelessly." Lei Oi loved Danyangzi the most. He held her in his hands, afraid that she would fall. He held her in his mouth, afraid that she would melt. He truly placed her at the top of his heart. "Auntie, you can't say these words again." Although a child's words carried no harm, a child's unintentional words could cause the listener to take it to heart and alienate the father-daughter relationship. Changxing blinked her eyes and mumbled a response. Then, she turned around and did whatever was most comfortable. "Nanny." Changxing closed her eyes and pretended to doze, but she still could not fall asleep. "I miss Wei Susu." The wet nurse said with a troubled expression, "If it's already tonight, I'm afraid Mr. Wei has already fallen asleep." The Wei Susu that Changxing mentioned was none other than Wei Ci, who was a street away from Feng Jin. Ignoring the wet nurse's words, Changxing clumsily climbed up from the bed, hugged her clothes, and wanted to go out. "Look for Wei Susu." The wet nurse was speechless. Although Changxing was young, she had an unusually bad temper. It was not that she had a bad temper, but she was rather stubborn. She would do whatever she wanted to do on a whim, and she would throw a tantrum if anyone tried to stop her. Feng Jin and his wife pampered their only daughter, and the servants complained incessantly. The wet nurse could only find someone to ask for advice from Feng Jin and his wife. Once the eldest lady's stubborn temper flared up, no one could suppress it. Feng Jin, who was enjoying the world of the two of them tenderly and sweetly with his wife, "What a fraud, my daughter! Let her look for her, and send someone to watch over her. Please, Zixiao, take Changxing in for one night, and bring her back tomorrow." Feng Jin could not get angry even if he wanted to, but he could not let his daughter run out of the residence alone, so he could only send someone to escort her. He had a good personal relationship with Wei Ci, and would occasionally send Wei Ci an invitation to be a guest at his house. Perhaps it was fate, but Changxing was exceptionally fond of this beautiful uncle. Later, Feng Jin understood that his daughter was greedy for beauty and had taken a fancy to Wei Ci's face. At such a young age, she was so obsessed with looks. Wei Jingxian held back her laughter and said, "It's so late, will Changxing disturb him if she goes over?" Feng Jin secretly rolled his eyes. Wei Ci was a loner, single, and did not have a nightlife. What was there to disturb about? To be able to send the little ancestor out, he felt that his ears were at peace. Thus, Wei Ci was rewarded with a bun that knocked on the door in the middle of the night. "Changxing." Wei Ci had not gone to sleep yet and was still working late at night. He vaguely heard a knock on the door, and the doorkeeper told him that there was a visitor. He did not expect that the other party was actually Changxing. According to the wet nurse who served Changxing, this girl ran out on her own. "Girl, did you quarrel with your father again?" Wei Ci smiled as he picked up the heavy Changxing and said to the women who served Changxing, Go back and tell Huaiyu that Changxing will stay here tonight. Ask him to send someone over to pick her up tomorrow. There were no other women in Wei Xi's residence, except for the kitchen maids and the servants who washed the clothes. Occasionally, Changxing came to stay at his place, and he would chase away all the female servants who served Changxing. It would be bad for his reputation if these women stayed in his residence. Changxing pursed her lips and wrapped her arms around Wei Xi's neck. She said with a serious face, "Father wants a younger brother, not Changxing." Wei Xi held back his laughter. It turned out that she felt abandoned and felt insecure. He comforted her, "How can that be? 10 younger brothers can't compare to Changxing's cuteness." Changxing was still a little angry. Although she was young, she was quite sensitive to the emotions of others. For example, she instinctively knew that Jiang Pingji belonged to the kind of thighs that she had to cling onto tightly. If her father was fierce to her, it would be right to cling onto Jiang Pingji's thighs. Another example was that she had a natural closeness to Wei Xi, because she felt that Wei Xi liked her very much. Because of this, Wei Xi was a completely harmless existence to her. But father still wants a younger brother. The immortal person heaved a deep sigh and obediently sat next to Wei Xi. His pair of black grape-like eyes rolled around randomly, looking at this and that. Although she was sitting, her heart had long since flown to an unknown place, and her little but was wriggling restlessly. Wei Xi put down his brush. With Changxing, the little ancestor, around, he knew that he could not stay up late to work tonight. Changxing is the best. Changxing felt greatly comforted. She rubbed against him coquettishly. Wei Susu is the best. Although Wei Xi was not married and had a family, his posture when taking care of a child was very standard. It did not take long for him to coax Changxing until she became tired. He moved his somewhat sore arms and secretly laughed at Feng Jin's indulgence of the child. He actually raised the child to be so heavy. Chapter 8:14. Wei Xi frowned slightly unhappily. "It's so late. Who could it be?" It was quite rude to visit in the middle of the night. Changxing was a child and could not be taken seriously, but it might not be the case for an adult. The gatekeeper lowered his head. This person was honest and dutiful. He did not dare to say a word easily. Moreover, he really could not describe it. The person did not announce his origin at all. He only said that he was a friend of his master. "Forget it. I'll go and take a look." Wei Xi sighed and carried Changxing to the reception hall. When the familiar back came into view, he was so shocked that he almost threw Changxing out. Of course, even if he wanted to, he could not. Changxing was too heavy. The owner of the beautiful figure put down her wide cloak hood, revealing a calm and cold face. She raised her eyebrows and looked at the child in Wei Xi's arms. "Greetings, my lord." "You have a child?" Jiang Pingji's gaze fell on Changxing's face. The child's cheeks were chubby and there were 2 blushes on her cheeks. She looked especially cute. Wei Xi smiled bitterly. "Why do you make fun of me, my lord? This is Changxing from Huaiyu's family. You haven't seen her for half a year. I'm afraid you've forgotten. Children grew up with the wind. Not to mention half a year, they might not recognize each other in half a month. She's gained some weight. I almost didn't recognize her. It's too heavy for you to carry. Leave her with me." Jiang Pingji glanced at Wei Xi's body. She always felt that Changxing could crush him to death. Wei Xi lowered his head in silence, but he still handed Changxing to her. "Why is Huaiyu's child here?" Jiang Pingji asked out of boredom. Huaiyu probably wanted to have another child, but Changxing, who was sharp by nature, discovered his intentions. Changxing probably felt that Huaiyu was going to abandon her. She felt uncomfortable and came to Ci for comfort. Children are forgetful. When they wake up tomorrow, they'll forget all their troubles. Children may be young, but they might understand everything. They just can't express it. Wei Xi felt that even if they were children, adults should not casually ignore their existence and feelings. Jiang Pingji responded with an "oh" and declined to comment further. There were a few lamps burning in the hall. The orange candlelight was faintly discernible in the dark, just like his perturbed mood. "My lord, what brings you here so late at night?" Wei Ci saw that Jiang Pingji did not speak for a long time. She only looked silently at Changxing, who was slowly sleeping soundly. He only felt a lump in his throat. He was almost pulled into his memories. He could only take the initiative to find a topic to break the current atmosphere. Jiang Pingji patted Changxing lightly and took the initiative to lower her voice. It was inconvenient to ask you at the banquet earlier, how is the matter in the northern borderline going? Wei Ci's nerves tightened. He threw the fragmented images in his mind into the depths of his memory and reported with a straight face. My lord, everything is going according to plan. Are there any unusual movements in the northern borderline? Did the higher-ups ask about the herdsmen raising rabbits and goats in private? Wei Ci shook his head. There is no such news yet. Because of the horse plague last year, the imperial court's regime was in turmoil. The king of the northern borderline was still in power, but the other tribes in the northern borderline were already complaining. In order to eliminate these voices, the king of the northern borderline took action continuously. They're busy fighting for power and don't even have time to care about a few big horse farms. So why would they care about the lives of ordinary herdsmen? The chances of them finding out are not high. Whether it was in this life or the previous life, the horse plague was an unavoidable catastrophe for the northern borderline. If it wasn't for the horse plague that greatly damaged the vitality of the northern borderline and they didn't have the strength to go south for a few years, Dongqing would probably be in danger. The horse plague in the previous life caused the northern borderline to lose the best opportunity to go south. When they recovered their vitality, the Central Plains was already occupied by a ferocious wolf. At that time, the northern borderline still wanted to take advantage of the chaos in the Central Plains and reap the benefits. They never expected that Jiang Pingji, who had been fighting to the death with the various feudal vassals, would suddenly stop. She didn't hesitate to cede her interests, adopt the diplomatic policy of forming an alliance, and turn around to attack the northern borderline. When the northern borderline was killed by her, they would turn around and shed all pretense of cordiality with their allies. In the previous life, the northern borderline was cannon fodder. In this life, they would probably end up even worse. The Lord was so diligent in managing the forces in the northern borderline, wasn't it to sharpen her knife to attack the northern borderline? Wei Ci said, when the northern borderline's royal court finds out, it may already be 2 or 3 years later. By that time, there were only 2 paths in front of the northern borderline. The first was to fight with their backs to the wall. Regardless of the consequences, they would continue to develop the pastures, raise war horses, and increase their combat power. As long as they conquered the Central Plains, they would have vast and fertile land and inexhaustible resources. They would no longer have to be crowded in the northern borderline, which lacked food. The second was to allocate manpower to deal with the rabbits and sheep that showed signs of flooding, leaving time for the pastures to recover. If it was the former, it would be a huge gamble for the northern borderline. If they won, they would have everything. If they lost, they would lose all their capital, not even their underwear would be left. If it was the latter, the northern borderline's recovery would be delayed for a few more years. This time was enough for Jiang Pingji to develop her forces. Jiang Pingji was very satisfied when she heard that. If there were a few more multipurpose angels like Wei Ci, she probably wouldn't have to worry about manpower anymore. Wei Ci felt uneasy all over. He didn't even dare to look at Jiang Pingji. His eyes were evasive. If my lord wants to ask about this, we can talk about it tomorrow. Why did you come so late at night? His lord's identity had just been restored. If it was revealed that she appeared in her subordinate's house late at night, there was no telling what kind of ugly scandals would spread. I came when I wanted to, Jiang Pingji said. Wei Ci was speechless. This was really in line with his lord's usual domineering style. After the two of them finished talking about official matters, the atmosphere fell into a strange silence again. It was like mud that was getting thicker and thicker, unable to be stirred no matter what. Wei Ci's gaze swept over Changxing, who was sleeping soundly. A question suddenly welled up in his mind. He couldn't suppress that impulse at all. I heard from Huayu that Changxing's nickname was given by my lord? Jiang Pingji looked up at him and grunted. Isn't there a custom of fathers asking passers-by to name their newborn children in order to seek happiness? Huayu came to me to ask for it. I can't possibly reject him, can I? What's more, I personally delivered Changxing. She's likable. Wei Si muttered, a peaceful and carefree life, a long and happy life. Jiang Pingji frowned secretly. What Wei Si said was the meaning behind the name she had given Changxing in the past. Wei Si said mysteriously, I heard from Huayu that he's always wanted another child. When the time comes, I'm afraid he'll come to you for help. Jiang Pingji smiled and said, my literary talent isn't good enough, and my name is also vulgar. Now that I have Changxing, Huayu won't rush to be abused. She was definitely not a coward when it came to calculating, but when it came to literary talent like reciting poems and couplets, she was really anxious. She wasn't illiterate, but in front of a real scholar, she was probably not far from being illiterate. That's not necessarily true. Even if it's just for peace of mind, Huayu will also ask for a name. Based on what you're saying, I should think about it in advance in case I need it? Jiang Pingji originally wanted Wei Si to be the gunslinger and help her come up with a male and female name. However, she could tell that Wei Si wasn't in a good mood, so she could only do it herself. Since we have Changxing, why don't we get Fushou as well? Whether it's Changxing or Fushou, it can be a male or female name. The meaning isn't bad. Wei Si was completely silent. Chapter 8:15. What was he upset about? Was it because of the two children's names? Jiang Pingji's heart skipped a beat. She vaguely guessed something. What special meaning do these two names have to you? Wei Si secretly took a deep breath to relieve the pulling pain in his chest. His pale face regained some color. There's no special meaning. He answered with a smile, but the smile on his face looked a little haggard and weak. Jiang Pingji did not ask further. She changed the topic and said, does Changxing often stay at your house? Who and where is she? Wei Si stood up and led the way. He was the only master in the manor. The other servants had their own residences, so most of the rooms in the manor were empty. Because Changxing often came over to disturb him, Wei Si simply prepared a room for her. The interior decoration was very elegant. Jiang Pingji said with a smile, this girl sleeps soundly, but her sleeping posture is really terrible. The children of rich and powerful families had to be disciplined in their every word and action. Even their sleeping posture had to be corrected. If Changxing's sleeping posture was in another family, she would be singled out and criticized. Even the servants who served her would be punished. Although the weather is getting warmer, it's not good to keep kicking the blanket. Wei Si saw that Changxing's cheeks were red from sleep. She shook her feet and kicked the blanket to the bottom of the bed. He could not help but laugh. He raised his hand and covered her with the thin blanket. Jiang Pingji looked at Wei Si for a long time without saying a word. Her stare made him uncomfortable. He wanted to hide but could not. In the end, he could only ask Jiang Pingji with a bitter smile, why are you looking at me like that, my lord? Is there something on my face? Jiang Pingji then shifted her gaze away. Wei Si heaved a long sigh of relief. But what she asked next scared him so much that his limbs became stiff. He broke out in a cold sweat and almost forgot to breathe. Zixiao, you're almost 24 this year, right? Why is there still no movement at home? In the era of the livestream audience, 24 years old was the age when one had just graduated from university and was in high spirits. There was no hurry to get married. In Jiang Pingji's era, 24 years old was considered a minor in the eyes of the law. It was not the legal age for marriage. In this era, a normal 24-year-old man who was slightly dissolute could have children who could form a baseball team. Look at Wei Si. Not only was he not married, he did not even have a concubine or a concubine. His usual nightlife was spent with official duties. When he was free, he would either visit his relatives and friends or kill time with books. He had never set foot in the world of mortals. He was clearly an ordinary person in the secular world, but he lived like an ascetic monk. How can a real man start a family without making any contributions? Wei Si threw out an all-purpose excuse. Moreover, marriage requires the consent of the parents and the words of the matchmaker. Now that my father's clan is in Zhongzhou, I'm afraid they won't be able to attend to CI. I'm not in a hurry right now. I'll delay it for a few more years. There's no hurry. Jiang Pingji smiled. Haven't made any contributions? How could that be? Zixiao is too humble about this. In terms of contributions, there are very few people who can compare to you. Jiang Pingji's words were not flattery. They came from the bottom of her heart. Wei Ci kept a low profile and his presence was weak, but how could his contributions be considered small? Not to mention anything else, just the fact that he had stationed his troops in the fields was enough to earn him a place in the history books. Throughout the ages, how many people had fought their whole lives for the sake of leaving their names in history? In the end, who had succeeded? Wei Ci said that he had not made any contributions. In Jiang Pingji's opinion, he was being overly humble. As for the words of the matchmaker and the orders of the parents, special methods are used during special times. Your relatives and clan are all in Zhongzhou, which is thousands of miles away. In this lifetime, you don't know if you will have the chance to meet them again. If you never see them, do you really intend to be alone for the rest of your life? At that moment, Wei Ci raised his head. His expression was frighteningly calm. His eyes carried a depth that was difficult for others to pry into. Jiang Pingji suggested with a smile, "Why don't we do it this way? I'll be the matchmaker for you." After she finished speaking, she noticed that Wei Ci's gaze and expression had become unusually complicated. It was as if there was a battle going on in his heart. It was difficult to determine the victor. Wei Ci's thoughts were dragged into a swamp by his memories. Fragments of the past flashed before his eyes. Take the child back. You know what to do. Your subject knows that Teng Qiumi suffered a hemorrhage during childbirth yesterday. She risked her life to give birth to a child. Your Majesty, do you want to give the child a nickname? Call him Fushou. From now on, he will follow your surname. You have full authority to decide everything. You don't have to ask me. The world had just stabilized. All the officials were worried about the heir. The emperor wanted to appoint the eldest daughter as the heir, but he was obstructed by the imperial censor. At that moment, the emperor was pregnant for the second time. Everyone focused their attention on this child. They were eager to give birth to a crown prince. Unfortunately, the situation was turbulent and natural disasters were endless. The Red Lotus rebels were perverse. They even spread their teachings to the inner residences of the court officials. After careful planning, they prepared for an assassination. In the chaos, the emperor gave birth with great difficulty. It was a male child that everyone had hoped for. He should have been conferred the title of crown prince as soon as he was born. Unfortunately, the child was unlucky. He died the moment he was born. They could only confer him the title of crown prince. After this disaster, it was difficult for the emperor to conceive again. The country could not be without heirs. The matter of appointing the crown princess was brought up to the surface again. This time, the officials were as quiet as chickens. They did not dare to have any objections. Wei Zixiao, you should understand. If Fushou is alive, only death awaits me and Changxing, I understand. I will take good care of Fushou. Before the 5 countries were unified, the struggle for power was not obvious. But once the countries were unified, all kinds of conflicts broke out. From the emperor's rise to power to his ascension to the throne, the aristocratic families had always been suppressed. After the country was unified, the aristocratic families could only form an alliance in private. They wanted to contend with the emperor and seize power. Wei Ci was clear that there could not be a crown prince at this time. Therefore, Fushou, who had just been born, was forced to die young. He changed his appearance and became the son of the Teng concubine in Wei Ci's manner. The key was that the Teng concubine was a made-up character. Fortunately, Wei Ci did not have a strong sense of existence. He behaved according to the rules. The officials who were fighting fiercely did not notice him at all. No one connected Crown Prince Zhangzhua, who died young, with Wei Ci's illegitimate son. When Wei Ci could not extricate himself from his memories, Jiang Pingji's face was magnified in front of his eyes. He was so scared that he suddenly leaned back. Fortunately, both of them were kneeling. Otherwise, he would have hit the back of his head hard on the ground. If I told Zisher that I wanted to give him a beauty, he would definitely be overjoyed. Why are you not willing? Jiang Pingji placed one hand on the ground beside his ear and looked at Wei Si's panic-stricken and pale face with a smile. She said helplessly, I'm not a dreadful beast. Every time I get close to you, you always show a frightened look. Wei Si took a deep breath and his thoughts became much clearer. I'm not very brave. I will naturally be frightened when my lord teases me like this. Jiang Pingji clicked her tongue. His words were rather resentful. Wei Si said, Can you get up, my lord? This is not appropriate. It will damage your reputation. Your mansion is empty, and there is no one guarding outside. Who would know? Wei Si could not push her away. His face suddenly turned red and pale. Even the red veins at the corners of his eyes were filled with embarrassment. Jiang Pingji could not force him too much. She could only get up. Chapter 8:16. Wei Si looked down and turned his head, trying not to look at Jiang Pingji. Of course, the name was not important, but the person. But how would she know what was bothering him? Names could be given, but what if the person was different? He did not want to serve the emperor in this life. She would meet another like-minded partner. What would that have to do with Wei Si? Two of the most important names to him had been given to someone else, and the future would be completely different from the history he knew. This was exactly what he wanted to see. Even so, the discomfort in his heart could not be alleviated in a short period of time. A man's mind is really hard to understand. Jiang Pingji sighed. Before Wei Si could react, she suddenly covered her waist and frowned, as if she was enduring the pain. Wei Si was not in the mood to care about anything else. He quickly asked with concern, Are you feeling unwell, my lord? Jiang Pingji's lips were white. I had to fight in person to conquer Jimin Pass. Before she finished speaking, Wei Si had already imagined a tragic drama. Countless bloody scenes seemed to flash before his eyes. It has been more than a month since the battle at Jimin Pass. Why hasn't my lord recovered? Wei Si did not dare to touch her, for fear of accidentally touching her wounds. She was stubborn by nature and looked weak in front of others. She must have been seriously injured and had yet to recover. As expected, Jiang Pingji gradually relaxed her brows and said carelessly, Maybe the wounds are too deep to kill. Wei Si felt a fire burning in his chest again. Whether it was in his previous life or this one, this person did not take care of her body. What did she mean by not killing? She was still young and healthy. She could roam around without any problems, so there was nothing wrong with her. But when she grew older, wouldn't the old wounds torture her to death? Si, call the doctor over. Wei Si's voice was low, and his words were irresistible. Jiang Pingji did not allow him to do that. She raised her hand and grabbed his hand, preventing him from getting up. No need, it's just a small injury. She smiled faintly and pulled Wei Si to her side. She spoke before he could object. Why don't you look at the sky outside? What day is it now? If they called for the doctor, the news of Governor Lu staying overnight at his subordinate's house would spread before daybreak. In the past, this would have been a wonderful story. Now that I've recovered my true gender, it's no longer a story but a scandal. Jiang Pingji's words were like a basin of cold water falling from the sky, freezing Wei Si awake from the inside out. His feverish brain also cooled down. The situation she described was indeed what Wei Si was afraid of, but it was even more unbearable for him to watch Jiang Pingji endure the pain and not seek treatment. Perhaps the wound accidentally split open. It shouldn't be a problem. When Jiang Pingji said this, she did not let go of Wei Si's hand. Wei Si's attention was attracted again, so he did not notice. Don't talk. Just let me calm down. Wei Si had no choice but to compromise. He suggested, My lord, why don't I send you back to the district headquarters in secret? Jiang Pingji said shamelessly, There's no need. Returning to the district headquarters would alarm the guards and the gatekeeper. Wouldn't that be revealing the truth? Zixiao, why don't you kindly help me clean up a room? If it's too late, I can make do with Changxing for the night. What else could Wei Ci say? You're the Lord. You're the boss. You have the final say in everything. Just as he was about to get up, he was embarrassed to find that his right hand had been held by her. Their skin that was in contact with each other was sweating, but she did not let go. I'm sleepy. Zixiao, don't disturb me. Jiang Pingji wanted to lie down and sleep without any explanation. Wei Ci could only swallow the words in his stomach. He maintained his kneeling position stiffly and looked at the person who was carelessly using his legs as a pillow. He was stunned and could not get angry at all. He kept his eyelids open, which kept fighting. He planned to release his right hand when Jiang Pingji fell asleep. At that moment, Changxing made full use of her terrible sleeping position. She successfully twisted her body and flipped from the head of the bed to the end. The thin blanket covering her body was kicked to the side of the bed. Her plump body was like a fresh flour pancake, lying on the mattress in a posture of a rooster standing on one leg. She licked her lips. There were only a few teeth in her mouth. Sparkling saliva dripped from the corner of her mouth. Wei Ci's eyebrows twitched violently. He carefully tilted his upper body and pulled over the thin blanket that Changxing had abandoned. He covered her properly again. As for carrying Changxing from the end of the bed to the head of the bed and continuing to sleep, he really could not do such a difficult action now. Looking at Changxing's sleeping face, then looking at the person on his lap who was obviously acting like a hooligan, Wei Ci only felt that his head was hurting. Why did he feel that he could no longer hide his identity? Why did he feel that Jiang Pingji did it on purpose? This was probably his hallucination, wasn't it? Wei Ci sighed. He could only use his hand to support himself on the high cushion and find a slightly more comfortable position to lean against. The surroundings were too quiet. He thought about many things in his mind. None of them were related to work. He felt that he had fallen. Perhaps he was too sleepy. Wei Ci could not help but point to his forehead and fall asleep in a daze. However, the dream was extremely unstable. Various scenes appeared one after another. Those uncles only want my younger brother and don't want Changxing. Grand tutor, I am a burden to mother, am I not? The girl's words caused Wei Ci's heart to ache. The scene changed again. In the blink of an eye, the crying girl became a slender and elegant grand nun. Her expression was as rare as her mother's. Grand tutor, is that my younger brother? Wei Ci said in the dream. Your Highness, no one in this world can be your younger brother. Mother told me the truth. Grand tutor, you don't have to be so timid. I will take good care of Grand tutor and my younger brother. Although they were not official, they were blood relatives after all. In the 18th year of Yongqin's reign in the Jiang dynasty, Emperor Qin was seriously ill. Everyone in the court was in a state of panic. It was at this time that a case named Crown Prince Zhang's was shocked the court. I am Crown Prince Zhang's unfilial son. The more time passed, the more chaotic the dream became. Wei Ci stood on the spot in a daze. In the chaos, he did not know what was happening in the world. The scenes melted in an instant and twisted into countless demons and monsters. They all laughed sinisterly and pounced on him. Just as he was about to be swallowed by the demons, Wei Ci shouted in horror. His body suddenly leaned forward. Jiang Pingji was pretending to be asleep at first. Later on, she really fell asleep. When the sky was just beginning to brighten, she was awakened by the subtle movements of Wei Ci's nightmare. Wei Ci was covered in cold sweat. His face was pale and his lips were trembling slightly because of fear. Chapter 8:17. According to the plot described by the audience in the streaming room, it was time for a romantic and melodramatic kiss. Sure enough, she shouldn't have trusted the group of singles in the streaming room. If a group of singles had a strategy to seduce someone, would they still be single? Jiang Pingji secretly ridiculed them. She didn't know that Wei Ci was also frightened by her. First, he had a nightmare. After waking up, he was shocked. After the shock, he suffered a tragic blow. His nose bumped into someone's face. It couldn't be more awkward. Wei Ci couldn't care less about the pain. He hurriedly prepared to bow down and apologize. Unfortunately, he had maintained his kneeling position for a whole night. Jiang Pingji even used him as a lap pillow. Now his legs were numb and he almost lost feeling. He sat on the ground in a sorry state. Tears welled up in his eyes. He looked pitiful. Jiang Pingji raised her hand and rubbed her cheek. She didn't tease Wei Ci about this embarrassing incident, lest she provoked him. Was it a nightmare just now? Jiang Pingji returned to normal, as if the episode just now had never happened. Look at you. Even your face is covered in cold sweat. Because the nightmare lasted too long, Wei Ci's reaction was slightly slow. He didn't even have the energy to investigate what happened just now. I had a nightmare. Wei Ci said with lingering fear, I dreamed of many evil ghosts. They almost tore me apart, he panted. Fear flashed through his dark, jade-like eyes, as if the lingering power of the nightmare had yet to dissipate. Jiang Pingji tilted her head. She looked curious. She said, the evil ghosts in the nightmare? Just now, I heard you saying things like, Crown Prince Xianxia, unfilial son, His Highness, and so on. What exactly did you dream of? Why are you so scared? If Wei Ci's complexion was said to be a little human before, when Jiang Pingji asked this question, his face suddenly turned as white as a sheet. Wei Ci opened his mouth. Something was stuck in his throat. He couldn't make a sound. An impulse to escape surged in his heart. Zixiao? Jiang Pingji raised her hand and placed it on his forehead. His forehead, which was covered in sweat, was cold and sticky. It gave people an extremely uncomfortable feeling. She touched ice, but to Wei Ci, it was scorching hot. It was like a cluster of flames quietly emitting warmth and dispelling the cold. My lord. Wei Ci was hesitant. Under the other party's concerned gaze, he awkwardly looked away. I'm fine. Jiang Pingji frowned slightly. How did Wei Ci's behavior look like he was fine? Who was the Crown Prince Xianxia that Wei Ci dreamt of? His Highness Changxing was definitely not the little fat boy who was sleeping soundly beside him. That person had a very important meaning to Wei Ci. As for the mutterings like, unfilial son, kneel down for good fortune and longevity, unfilial son pretending to be the heir of the emperor, and deserve to be executed, she felt that the information was too much. Jiang Pingji asked, you haven't answered me yet. What did you dream about? Wei Ci's heart sank. The warmth that he had painstakingly gathered dissipated in an instant. He trembled and said, I can't remember clearly. I only remember that the dream just now was very scary. There were thousands of malicious ghosts chasing after me, demanding my life. I woke up when I stepped on air. Jiang Pingji thought of the audience's advice and comforted him. Dreams and reality are opposites. Don't take it to heart. It's already dawn outside. I see that you haven't slept well all night. Why don't you go and get some sleep? The matters in the government office can be postponed for half a day. Wei Ci's heart calmed down a little and he heaved a long sigh of relief. Jiang Pingji comforted him like that, which meant that the previous story could be forgotten. Thank you for your understanding, my lord. Jiang Pingji put on a wide hood and sneaked out from the side door. With her skills, she would naturally not be discovered. Wei Ci rubbed his dizzy head and prepared to go back and get some sleep. 5 years had passed since he returned to his youth. He thought that he had gradually forgotten about the past. Who knew that he would be caught red-handed by his lord last night? He was really scared out of his wits just now. He knew that Her Majesty was not a suspicious person, but she was more difficult to deal with than a suspicious person, because any clues could become a stepping stone for her to pry into the truth. Ordinary people could not hide from her eyes at all. Since the establishment of the Jiang Kingdom, the aristocratic families had formed an alliance. They seemed powerful, but when had they not been manipulated by her like monkeys in the palm of her hand? The aristocratic families were like prey in a spider's web. The more they struggled, the more powerless they became. In the face of such an empress, he had to be tense at all times, lest the other party see through his disguise in a moment of carelessness. He had no reason not to be afraid. Even if Her Majesty had just turned 18 years old, she was still not to be trifled with. Since Her Majesty's rise to power, the aristocratic families had been like a carrot, peeling off a layer of the other party's skin from time to time. After being peeled like this for 18 years, even the fattest carrot had become a thin carrot. Every time the aristocratic families were full of confidence that they would be able to make a comeback, reality would always slap their cheeks swollen. The emperor and his ministers, who were extremely harmonious in the imperial court, fought to the death in the imperial court. In terms of danger, there were only 3 times that it was the most dangerous. The first time was the riot of the Red Lotus Group. It happened to coincide with Her Majesty's difficult labor and birthday. Many people mistakenly said that Her Majesty had died. Who said that I had a difficult labor? A group of ministers hurriedly cried and mourned. When Her Majesty appeared with a sneer on her face, more than a dozen faces uniformly turned gray. The second time was when Her Majesty wantonly carried out imperial examinations and land reform. The interests of the aristocratic families were affected, and they secretly planned a palace coup. The third time was in the 18th year of Yongchen. Her Majesty was seriously ill and bedridden for several months. Crown Prince Xianxia, supported by the aristocratic families, tried to force her to abdicate. Thinking of the last reason, Wei Ci felt waves of pain in his chest. It was so painful that he could not help but cover his chest, and his face turned pale. The son that he had painstakingly taught for more than a decade was actually stupid enough to be used by others. Instead, he turned against his biological parents. Was the temptation of imperial power and the throne really so terrifying? Wei Ci returned to his dream in a daze. He heard a familiar roar. I was originally the son of the emperor, the legitimate crown prince. Now, I have been framed by scoundrels and become the son of a concubine. Is this really fair? He stood there in a daze. His divine senses were withdrawn from his body, and he could not react. Every word pierced his heart. Who told you that you are the legitimate crown prince? Crown Prince Xianxia was conferred the title posthumously. You are still alive, so this posthumous title is naturally invalid. Now, you are treacherously trying to abdicate and trying to kill the emperor. You deserve to be executed. I have never wanted you to be the crown prince. You are standing in front of me. Do you want to reprimand me for making you the son of a concubine and ruining your glory, splendor, and wealth? Or do you think that you are more capable than Chongqing, that you can govern the world and protect the people? Zixiao is a peerless scholar of the nation. He has taught you in every way, but what have you learned from him? You are so stupid. Other than being used by others and falling headlong into the trap that I have set, what other abilities do you have? You are so stupid. Other than the right to inherit the throne and his identity as a prince, Wei Ci had never wronged this child. In the end, he was called a scoundrel. Chapter 8:18. When Wei Ci woke up again, the sun had already climbed to the top of his head. He could still hear the sound of munching. He turned his head and saw a pile of flour cakes lying on the ground with a plate of snacks by her hand. Flour cakes? No. The chubby Chongqing noticed the movement and turned to look at Wei Ci. Wei Su is awake. Chongqing giggled and was about to get up when her round eyes swept across the crumbs on her hands. She seemed to have thought of something and guiltily turned to kneel. Quietly, she covered the plate of snacks with her buttocks, thinking that Wei Ci would not be able to see it. Wei Ci was speechless. Feng Huayu, if you don't restrain your daughter, she will really go crazy. Chongqing, come here. Wei Ci's voice was very hoarse as he waved at Chongqing. Chongqing got up shyly and pushed the plate of snacks aside with her chubby toes, trying to destroy the evidence. Wei Su. Wei Ci pinched Chongqing's small hair bun and smiled weakly. Don't eat secretly, lest your father resents me for starving you. Chongqing lowered her head. She was young, but she also knew that she was guilty. She originally wanted to bring it over to share with her friend Wei Su, but she could not bear the hunger, so she secretly held it and ate it. Unknowingly, there were only scraps left. Coincidentally, Wei Ci woke up at this time and was frightened. Is Wei Su sick? She slept for a long time. In Wei Si's mansion, no one else could be considered as the master except for him. Changxing naturally came and went as she pleased, and the servants did not dare to restrain her. She's not sick, she just doesn't want to get up. Changxing nodded and made an "oh" sound. She quietly covered her mouth and said, Changxing doesn't like to get up either, the nanny is bad. Every time she wanted to stay in bed, the nanny would always carry her out of bed. Every time this happened, Changxing would be extremely resentful. Why couldn't she be fatter and heavier so that the nanny could not carry her? Wei Si laughed involuntarily. He asked the servant to take care of Changxing while he went to take a bath and wash off the sticky sweat on his body. Only then did he feel refreshed. Your mouth has never been idle all day long. Wei Si was haunted by nightmares and his breath was weak. He was panting after 2 steps while carrying the heavy Changxing. Fortunately, the 2 families were not far apart. Otherwise, he would have lost his life. I've really troubled you last night. Changxing is a stubborn child. I really can't do anything about her. Feng Jin had already come back from work for lunch, so he asked Wei Si to stay for lunch. The Feng family was strict and did not like to be extravagant. Therefore, the lunch at Feng Jin's house leaned towards a vegetarian diet, which suited Wei Si's taste. Children are all like this. They like to stick to others. This is their nature. After lunch, Wei Si regained some energy. Feng Jin did not suspect anything else. He asked, Zixiao, are you also worried about what happened in the morning? Wei Si was surprised and asked in a daze, what happened in the morning? Everyone's office was not in the same place, and they could not meet each other every day, so Feng Jin did not think that Wei Si did not go to the government office at all today. About the Wanzhou government. Feng Jin's brows were tightly furrowed. He was rather vexed. The prefecture? Couldn't they just use the original state capital? My lord is not a person who likes to be extravagant, and she will not waste money and manpower just for her own enjoyment. Wei Si said without thinking, could it be that Huaiyu has been frowning because of this matter? Feng Jin said, the previous state capital has been burned down by the remnants of the Tsing-Yi army. If we choose that place as the state capital, it will take at least a year for it to take shape. As for Xiaoyu's side, it will cost nearly 1,000,000 taels, not to mention other labor costs. Because of the war in the north, the people of the original state capital had long dispersed. If they rebuilt the state capital there, not only would they have to spend a lot of money, but they would also have to spend a lot of effort to recruit labor. It would be a waste of time and effort. It was not worth it. Moreover, the state capital was similar to the central brain of the entire power, so they could not be careless. Wei Si furrowed his brows. After thinking deeply for a while, he made a decision. What did my lord say? Feng Jin said, my lord's intention is clear. It will not delay official business and waste money and manpower. As for where to choose, she has no opinion. Wei Si asked again, what about the others? Feng Jin paused, then said rather awkwardly, the others' opinion. They want to set the state capital in Shangjing. Shangjing? This was the same as Wei Si's choice. However, looking at Feng Jin's expression, one could tell that he was struggling in his heart. It was not appropriate to set the state capital in Shangjing. Huaiyu doesn't seem to agree. Wei Si used a declarative tone. Feng Jin laughed bitterly and said, Shangjing is the capital of Dongqing. If my lord sets the state capital there, I'm afraid it will cause gossip. Moreover, Shangjing experienced a huge earthquake. Every time I go near there, I feel terrified. What happened that year is still vivid in my mind. Back then, the power of the earthquake was too great. How many lives were lost? Even though more than 2 years had passed, every time Feng Jin recalled the scene of that day, he still felt terrified. The imperial court has moved the capital to Qinzhou. Shangjing is no longer the capital. If other people were gossiping, just let them be. His Highness might not take it to heart. Even if there are complaints in the imperial city of Qinzhou, can they remove my lord's state magistrate? A disdainful smile appeared at the corner of Wei Si's mouth. He continued, the earthquake that year destroyed Shangjing. How many people lost their homes? Now that Shangjing is a wasteland, we can't just leave it be. If we make Xianxia the state capital, we can recruit the surrounding refugees and reduce hidden dangers. That's one of the reasons. Secondly, Xianxia is an ancient city after all. Some buildings can still be used. It can reduce expenses. As the former capital, Xianxia had a different meaning. It was the center of the entire Wanzhou. Traffic was accessible from all directions. If it wasn't for Dongqing's emperor occupying it, the state capital of Wanzhou would have been set in Xianxia. Feng Jin sighed and said, "I know this is the case, but I'm still afraid. I'm worried that the earthquake will happen again." Wei Ci still had some reasons that he didn't say. There were more than 2 reasons for setting the state capital in Xianxia. There was another more important reason. The local gentry in Shangyang County were too arrogant. The Feng family didn't manage things, and the others were even more unscrupulous. Jiang Pingji had been staying in Fengyi County and couldn't keep an eye on these demons all the time. They had more opportunities to cause trouble. If the state capital was set in what used to be Xianxia, the gentry in Shangyang County would naturally be quiet and wouldn't dare to act rashly. Whether it was in his previous or current life, Wei Ci knew that his lord would definitely fight with the aristocratic families. Even if his lord was from an aristocratic family, she wouldn't be merciful. Wei Ci only felt a headache when he thought of the struggles after the establishment of the Jiang dynasty. Restraining the authority of the aristocratic families couldn't wait until the country was unified. If possible, he had to suppress them now. Chapter 8:19. Have you all decided to set the capital in Xianxia? Jiang Pingji felt that her subordinates had their own ideas. They had unanimously decided to rebuild Xianxia. They were all up to no good. Jiang Pingji was not the only one who thought that way. Even the viewers in the streaming room thought that they were up to no good. Under normal circumstances, she would broadcast live from 7 in the morning to 7 in the evening. Many viewers said that now that the live streaming industry was so developed, there was only one host in the world who was as dedicated and hardworking as she was and never cheated the audience. The only problem was that there was a limit to the number of viewers in the streaming room. Every time they watched the stream, they had to compete on their speed and luck. The streaming room only had a maximum of 150,000 viewers, but there were 5 to 6 billion people who knew about it. Jiang Pingji's streaming room was renowned all over the world. As a matter of fact, when she asked this question, countless bullet screens floated across the live broadcast screen. Nongfu Shanquan Yudiangshuan, streamer, you're playing with fire. After watching yesterday's video, I felt that something was going to happen. If the capital is set in Xianxia, won't everyone know what Sima Zhao is up to? Xinjia, it should be changed. Everyone knows what Lu Lanting's intentions are. Hu Xin Hongyan, what a pity. I really want to see what the little emperor and empress dowager's faces will look like if the streamer sets the capital in Xianxia. Bubbles dream. What else can they look like? They'll look like they drank a vat of yellow-ish tea. Qianqiububi, wretch? Your analogy is disgusting. I'm having lunch in the company's cafeteria. Most of the viewers in the streaming room were cheering for Jiang Pingji and her subordinates. With the royal family still around, they had the guts to build the capital in what used to be the capital. What did that mean? A viewer's bullet screen was very vivid. Summer departing Xianggu. The streamer is up to no good. It's like the man eloping with his sister-in-law and concubine, leaving his wife sleeping on the bed. Not long after, a group of powerful bandits came, occupied the mansion, and slept with the man's wife. Even if this first wife was a woman that the male master didn't want, if she was taken by a second stranger, how could his expression be good? In addition to these jesting bullet screens, there were also a few weird bullet screens floating in the corner of the live broadcast screen. Hua hua haonen shui, I don't care about anything else. I just want to know when the host will let go of her racial prejudice and open up other languages. Weigoran Shuahua. In order to follow the live stream, I studied hard for 3 years and passed level 10 of Mandarin, but there are still many things I don't understand. In this regard, Jiang Pingji spread her hands. She was also very helpless. The system had already been imprisoned by her, so there was no way for her to level up the live stream. Speaking up to this point, he had to add that for some reason, the live stream had to be logged in using the Chinese network. Even the bullet screen was limited to the Chinese input method. As a result, many foreigners had to travel all the way to China to watch the live broadcast. Otherwise, they could only climb over the wall to watch the recorded broadcast on the internet. Even when he came to China, he still had to learn the Chinese language if he wanted to send a bullet screen message and understand what the host was saying. The more he said, the more tears there would be. Jiang Pingji silently sympathized with the audience. Her subordinates exchanged glances and chose one of them to speak on behalf of her. Feng Jin listed in detail the benefits of setting the provincial government in Shangjing. Everything he did was based on Jiang Pingji's interests. He had no other selfish motives. After his impassioned speech, Feng Jin hesitantly added, Shangjing was attacked by the earthquake. 9 out of 10 buildings collapsed. If we rebuild it on top of the ruined city, I'm afraid we have to be extra careful. During the construction, we have to use sufficient materials. There must be no corruption or shoddy work. I think it's better to hire an experienced master craftsman to personally supervise the construction, design, and make overall plans. Only then can we comfort the people who have suffered from the earthquake. An earthquake had taken the lives of tens of thousands of people in a city. Even if such a dangerous place was rebuilt, the people would still have lingering fears. If they wanted to attract the refugees to come closer, they had to let them know that the rebuilt buildings were sturdy and not afraid of the earthquake. More importantly, Jiang Pingji turned her gaze to Zhang Ping. Shiheng, do you know how to do this? The other party was stunned for a moment. He immediately smiled bitterly and said, It's not difficult for Ping to build a house and a room. I'm afraid it's beyond my ability to build a city. Jiang Pingji said nonchalantly, It's not that troublesome to build a city. You just need to know how to build a house. As long as you copy and paste a house thousands of times, won't it be a city? Piling up the city walls and building the city walls, won't the prototype be there? As for the drainage system, you can check how the water pipes in Xiangyang district are laid and how the drainage system is drained. You can also learn a thing or two from it. Everyone was dumbfounded. Listening to their lord's words, it seemed that building a city was very simple. They could guess what copy was literally, but what the hell was paste? Jiang Pingji expressed that this question was a little profound. She should hire Tang Qi, who the livestream viewers had been complaining about recently, to explain. Zhang Ping was forced to do something beyond his ability. He immediately jumped up and down like a thunderclap. Wei Ci, who was beside him, noticed his dilemma and said softly, I have a few maps of the ancient city here. Maybe they'll be helpful to you. When Zhang Ping heard that, he was suddenly enlightened. He felt that he had found a strong backer. He decisively stepped out and dragged his friend Wei Ci into the fire pit without another word. My lord, I want to borrow someone from you. Jiang Pingji said with a smile, It's better to build the prefecture as soon as possible. Now is the time to cultivate and recuperate. Other matters are not busy, so naturally, I have to make way for this matter. Tell me, who do you want to borrow? As long as it's within my means, I'll try my best to fulfill your request. Zhang Ping bowed with folded hands and said, My lord, please lend me Zixiao. Zixiao is erudite and multi-talented. He has dabbled in the 5 elements, 8 trigrams, and Qimen Duanjia. He has also been particular about architecture, and he's also good at calligraphy and painting. If I can get Zixiao's help, I think I'll be able to draw the map of the prefecture very soon. Wei Ci was speechless. I have something to say, but I don't know if I should say it. He kindly lent out the precious map and tried to help his friend, but this stupid teammate directly pulled him into the fire pit. He was furious. Did this guy think that the map of a city was so easy to draw? Jiang Pingji saw Wei Ci's expression of wanting to say something but hesitated. She couldn't help but curl the corners of her lips and say, As you say. Zhang Ping was overjoyed and hurriedly thanked her. Thank you, my lord. Wei Ci was by Zhang Ping's side. He silently chuckled. He really wanted to beat the cheater beside him to death. The others who were not named heaved a long sigh of relief. They had escaped. They were not stupid. Even if they had not done it before, They knew how tiring it was to build a city. Working overtime was not considered tough, but they were afraid of living in the construction site all year round. Everyone could not hide in time. Only one person did not know the inside story. He foolishly stepped out and volunteered. This person was Xiao Guang. No matter what, he was an otaku who practiced the way of Moism. There would always be many similarities with the way of architecture. Moreover, he was unusually curious about the drainage route of Xiangyang district. He planned to take advantage of this opportunity to understand the core technology. Chapter 8:20. Building a city required an on-the-spot investigation, measurement of the land, and a clear understanding of the situation before starting to design and draw the blueprint. Wei Ci knew that he had been tricked by Zhang Ping, his useless teammate. He would not have any leisure time in the future. Before heading to Shangjing, Wei Ci secretly looked for Jiang Pingji. The two of them had a secret conversation. Only they knew about the content of the conversation. "My lord, I would like to ask you something disrespectful. What are your ambitions?" Wei Ci was a rather rational person. After 2 days of adjustment, he had recovered from the nightmare that night. He looked like nothing had happened. He talked about official matters without any personal emotions. Jiang Pingji and Wei Ci chose a secluded place to talk. The surroundings were empty, so they were not afraid of being eavesdropped. Even if the walls had ears, Jiang Pingji would discover it immediately because no one in the world could hide from her mental investigation. "Where are my ambitions?" she murmured and said with a smile. "Naturally, my ambitions are for the world and the people. Zixiao and I are connected and have the same aspirations. If you have anything to say, just say it directly. There's no need to sound me out. As long as it's from you, I will listen carefully." Wei Ci's cheeks were hot and his ears were bloodshot. Jiang Pingji always said such misleading things. Even if Wei Ci had been through hundreds of battles, he still could not resist. He collected his wandering thoughts and returned to normal. He said seriously, "My lord, my ambitions are not only for the world and the people, but also for the country to prosper and for the world to be peaceful. Now that the world is in chaos, countless people have suffered from this disaster. They have to leave their homes and become destitute. They have lost their homes and land. There are even countless people who sell their children to survive. Everyone knows that the world will be divided after being united for a long time, and united after being divided for a long time. A country has its ups and downs. The prosperity of the country is due to the wisdom of the king and the virtuous officials. Only then can the weather be favorable and the people live and work in peace. However, why does the country decline? Is it because the king is muddle-headed and the officials are mediocre? There are only a few reasons for the prosperity of the country, but what about the decline of the country? Is it because the king is muddle-headed, the officials are mediocre, and the weather is not good? Wei Ci had been thinking about this question since he was young in his previous life. He had been thinking about it until now. Wei Ci had always admired Jiang Pingji, not only because what she did was his ideal, but also because of another reason. She was the light on his lost path, guiding him to uncover many questions that confused him. If any one of these problems were to be mentioned, it would probably cause a huge uproar and cause all the scholars in the world to condemn him. Wei Ci was aware of the danger, but he did not feel lonely or helpless, because he knew that there were still people walking on the same path as him. Ci flipped through the historical records and discovered that the decline of the country was not only a phenomenon from top to bottom, but also from bottom to top. If the country was compared to a towering tree, the ruler was the crown, and the officials were the branches, then the common people were the roots that extended all the way to the ground. If the crown of the tree died, the tree could still survive. If the branches were damaged, the trunk could still grow. However, if a large part of the root system is damaged, the tree will be in danger. Jiang Pingji listened attentively. She could feel that he had his own understanding of this. He was neither reading from a book nor theorizing on paper. Wei Ci continued, "Soil is the root of the tree, it is the foundation that nurtures them. If the soil is taken away, the tree's roots will not survive. Jiang Pingji's expression turned solemn. She understood what Wei Si meant. You said land annexation? Wei Si's expression tightened. He took a deep breath and said in a low voice, exactly. What was land annexation? Nowadays, land could be bought and sold. The aristocratic families, the country gentry, and the bureaucrats could borrow power and money to get more and more land from the hands of the peasants. They could even make the peasants have no apprentices. If they were despicable, they could even seize it by force. This phenomenon was especially obvious in a disaster year. Once the common people lost their land, it meant that they had lost something to rely on for survival. They could only continue to sell their properties, become cheap labor, and become tenant farmers for the big landlords. In this era, this was a stubborn disease that was difficult to cure, and it would become more and more serious. Once land annexation reached a certain level, the country would also go on the path of decline. Even if there was a ruler who could revive the country, it would not be able to save the dynasty. As land annexation became more and more intense, there would be an irreconcilable conflict between the peasants and the tyrants who owned a large amount of land. There would also be intense friction between the country and these tyrants. Looking at the historical records, many kings who were clear and bright would take measures to curb the pace of land annexation, so that the land annexation could be alleviated to a certain extent. If it could not be alleviated, then there would inevitably be a problem. The peasants would raise their hoes and rebel. Jiang Pengji came from the future. The entire universe was an area that humans had explored. Because of the interstellar war and people's thoughts, the speed of population reproduction could not keep up with the speed of expansion. For intelligent creatures, the entire universe was boundless. They had a wider space and endless unknown territory to explore. But it was different in ancient times. Human technology was backward, and their productivity was low. They were bound by the land invisibly, and it was difficult for them to break free. For them, the land was a piece of cake. If others got more, they would get less. There was a conflict of interest between them. The source of human war was the struggle for interest. In ancient times, it was traced back to the struggle for land. Not to mention this dimension, the audience in the streaming room also had the problem of land annexation. In the history of Hua country, successive dynasties had passed laws to adjust the governance of land annexation, and the land reform had been carried out step by step. The equal field system, the whip law, and the distribution of men to the mu were all the same. Jiang Pengji disliked kneeling and sitting uncomfortable, so she simply changed her posture and leaned against the table. Go on, I'm listening. Wei Si felt his heart beating like a drum. He could still hear the powerful vibration coming from the left side of his chest. He knew he was nervous. My lord, in my opinion, why don't we eliminate the source of land annexation from the root? As soon as he said this, Wei Si felt his whole body lose its strength. He was only waiting for Jiang Pingji to express her opinion. Jiang Pingji asked, eliminate the source? Wei Si did not say anything else. He only said 8 words, all the land under the heavens belongs to the king. Jiang Pingji was shocked. She looked up and met Wei Si's eyes. She saw the determination in his eyes. After a while, she smiled happily. Okay, I got it. All the land under the heavens belongs to the king. She liked this sentence. Not only did she like this sentence, but she also seemed to like the person who said it. Zixiao, come here. She waved at Wei Si. His face turned from pale to rosy. When he heard her call, a trace of hesitation flashed in his eyes. However, Wei Si never knew what no meant when facing Jiang Pingji. He walked forward on his knees. The distance between them was less than 10 inches. Jiang Pingji suddenly grabbed his hand. Wei Si was so shocked that he almost jumped up. Don't be afraid. I won't eat you. Wei Si secretly revealed a bitter smile. She indeed wouldn't eat him, but to him, it might be more frightening than being eaten. Zixiao's filial piety is with me. Wei Si widened his eyes in shock. His eyes, which contained all the stars in the universe, were so bright that it was dazzling. The audience in the streaming room who was watching the whole process, burp, Chapter 821. Hua Luo Han Yen Bo. Burp, oh my god, this mouthful of dog food is making me bloated. Who gave me a glass of water? I choked on it. Free lemon. The streamer's hooliganism is getting richer and richer. Looking at the situation, it won't be long before he gets the beauty. Host, Bao Bao still has a lot of love books and magic weapons to win. I guarantee that you will be more overbearing than an overbearing president. Although Jiang Pingji had never revealed anything, the audience in the streaming room were not naive and innocent. Wasn't there a good saying, you haven't seen a pig run, but you haven't eaten pork? Although 99% of the audience in the live broadcast room were single dogs, they had grown up watching countless Mary Sue romance dramas. They were even more familiar with the related online novels. They had seen many storms and waves, so what kind of tricks had they not seen to flirt with men and girls? They dared to swear on the dog food in their arms that the streamer must have taken a fancy to Beauty C's unparalleled beauty. Not only did he fancy his face and covet his body, but he also wanted to dominate his soul. If not for the fact that they could not defeat him, they really wanted to carry Wei Ci away and declare their sovereignty. When Jiang Pingji saw the 150,000 incompetent military advisors trying to teach her how to conquer the city, she couldn't help but think of the blunder from before. Her brows twitched. Host V, when you single dogs can use these strategies to get rid of your single status, then recommend them to me. If he wasn't single, he probably wouldn't have so much time to spend in the live broadcast room, right? Jiang Pingji's words hit the audience's sore spot. That hurts, host. Countless people who loved single people expressed their condemnation. Were single dogs not protected animals? Summer departing Xianggu, I'm secretly cursing the streamer. I hope you won't be able to get rid of your single status. Dong Kai Kai Jia Jia, don't be too proud of yourself, streamer. In my opinion, there seems to be some conflict between Beauty Ci and the streamer. Whether it's the first time they met or now, Beauty Ci seems to be quite resistant to the streamer's approach. Every time, she is like a frightened rabbit, wanting to jump 3 feet high. Some time ago, she went to the Tiebao forum to review the exciting videos from the past few years. She found that Ci Marin did not resist others coming into contact with her, except for the host. Jiang Pingji poked their sore spot, so naturally, the audience in the streaming room would respond with a tooth for a tooth and an eye for an eye. With someone's reminder, many people also figured out that something was wrong. They had never heard of any conflict between the streamer and Wei Ci. Why was the latter always resisting the former? With this question in mind, many people simply let their imagination run wild. The conclusion they came up with made Jiang Pingji not know whether to laugh or cry. Ningji, you die so miserably, maybe there's some kind of conspiracy? For example, does Beauty Ci have ulterior motives towards the host? As soon as this conspiracy theory was put forth, it was immediately shot down. Liangpin Puzi, that's impossible. If Simiron really has an ulterior motive for the streamer, he must be out of his mind to say to the streamer, everything under the heavens belongs to him. What's more, don't you know what kind of person the host is? I am firmly on Ci Mei's side. Other than conspiracy theories, there were other wild guesses, such as fragrant spicy squid slices. Beauty Ci is a reserved person after all. The streamer is so bold and flirtatious. It must be scary. Hungagate Raisin, Simi is a rabbit, and the streamer is a tiger. How can a rabbit not be afraid of a tiger? Looking at the heated discussion in the streaming room, Jiang Pingji did not join in. Instead, she carefully thought about what Wei Ci had said. Under the premise of limited land resources, land annexation was a headache for all dynasties. According to Wei Ci, instead of wasting effort to slow down the process of land annexation, it was better to cut it off from the root. Since it was said that everything under the heavens belongs to the king, then wouldn't it be justifiable for all land to belong to the country? However, Jiang Pingji could jump out of the fence, but it did not mean that others could. Not to mention Wei Ci, who was a talented person who was well-read, even an illiterate street gangster would not be willing to do so. In this era, land was not just land, it was also a treasure bowl that could produce wealth. As long as one could climb up and become a person above others, it would be justifiable to take more treasure bowls into one's pocket. To put it bluntly, this was about benefits. Once the land was returned to the country, not only would the rich and poor jump up and down, even the ordinary people would not agree to it. If the land belonged to the country, how could they feel at ease? The people would not think about the long-term future. They would only care about the benefits in front of them. Jiang Pengji dared to return the land to the country. In the eyes of the people, she had snatched away the foundation that they relied on to make a living from their hands. If the people were like that, it was needless to say for the aristocratic families that sat on countless fertile lands. Those who struggled bitterly and tried to make a name for themselves would oppose it even more. Jiang Pengji understood these principles, and Wei Ci understood them even more. However, understanding did not mean that he could not do it. It depended on how he did it. Wei Ci was sacrificing his own future benefits when he proposed this to Jiang Pengji. Aside from Wei Ci, who else could do this calmly? This is really a difficult problem for me. Although it was difficult, it was not without hope. If it was in the era when the country was unified and the concept of land belonging to the country was raised, all the people in the world would rise up in revolt. However, it was a chaotic world now. The land that Jiang Pengji conquered and cultivated, as long as she did not sell it, was all hers in name. For example, the order to station land was actually renting land from the government to the landless people to farm, and the government would take a cut from it. To be honest, this action was quite a hooligan. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was a bandit. Nowadays, whoever had the bigger fist was the boss. If they were not happy, they could fight it out. The land belonged to the government, not the people who farmed it. Jiang Pengji frowned and thought deeply. Originally, it was only a plan to station land to alleviate the urgent situation and settle the refugees. Now it can be implemented for a long time, and let the people have the concept of public ownership of land. I must let the people know that leasing land is far more secure than privately owned land. If that's the case, the scale of station land has to be expanded, and the proportion of food taken by the government has to be reduced accordingly. One could not become fat in one bite, and there was no good thing that could be achieved overnight in this world. If Jiang Pengji wanted to take away the cake from the aristocratic families and the powerful officials, she must have strong means and strength. One was the army, and the other was the people. Before the dagger was revealed, she not only had to strengthen herself, but she also had to quietly weaken the power that suppressed the aristocratic families and the powerful officials. I am strong, and the enemy is weak. With this, we might be able to fight in the future. However, before her personal strength reached a certain level, she and Wei Ci could not reveal this idea to avoid being criticized by the world. Even if the land reform was successful, there would be a series of problems later on. You're tuning in to the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.